meeting. Register contemplates these committee meetings and publicized by notifying the area news media, by updating the OPPD website, and by mailing such notice to each of the district's directors on September 5th, 2007. We'll start out with safety.
Great, welcome, very good, very good. Hey, welcome to the 10th floor conference room. That was yesterday's meeting. Ninth floor, thank you. I'll get it. So we're on the west side of the building. In the event we have to exit this floor, we would take the elevators all the way down to the main level, exit out on the 17th Street side. Unless there is a fire, we would use the steps and move all the way down to the main level and then exit out through the doors as well. The AED and the first aid kit are one on top of each other to the right of the elevators. If you have a medical condition, please write it down or tell your neighbors, anybody who's certified in the use of an AED or in CPR. So we have multiple folks here. Let's see here. Mark, would you call 911 in the event that we need it? I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And let's see here. We don't have any plans for severe weather, but in the event that we would do that, we would actually migrate via elevator to the garage level in our secured area there. And if there's any other questions to our safety briefing, there is a fire extinguisher right to my left here, to the right of the door. All right, thank you.
All right, with that, I know Director McGuire's been on through here about half an hour, just running a little late. Director Lyons, haven't heard from him, but I think haven't heard he's not going to join us. So, but we'll get started with that anyway, and go right to the Finance Committee report. Javier, you were welcome to
Absolutely. Good morning. The results for November, financial results for November are in. Again, a relatively standard month, which is a good thing for financials. Retail revenues for November were slightly higher than budget, $66.8 million, that's $6.2 million over budget. Year-to-date revenues are $867 million, which is just $1 million under budget. So for the year, we're pretty much tracking budget on retail revenues. Off-system sales is a little bit different story this time around. I would say this is a topic for this month. Off-system sales revenues for November were $16.2 million, which is $2.5 million over budget. And we continue to sell more power than we expected into the market, and we receive relatively stable prices for the power. Conversely, we were not only selling power, we're also buying power. In the previous months, you've heard me say those two have typically been a wash. This month has been a little different. We ended up buying less power than the power we sold. So on the purchase power, fuel and purchase power expenses for November were $27.5 million, which is $0.3 million over budget. So less than, we purchased less power than the power we sold. That's a positive for our net income in November. O&M, operation and maintenance expenses continue the same trend. Again, this is the result of our continued cost improvement initiative and sustainability initiative. These expenses for the month of November were $25.3 million, which is $1.4 million under budget. Year to date, this category of expenses are $291.5 million, which is $10.7 million under budget. This is again something that we continue to find ways to save, and we've already embedded a lot of these savings into next year's budget, and we will continue through 2018 to continue to find more ways to save. So a great story, and I'm really pleased to see the results materializing in our financials for November. Our net income for November includes a reminder that November is typically a negative net income month. As we come to the end of the season, we were projecting net income to be negative, in the negative $10 million range. November net income was negative $1.8 million. So significantly better than what we were expecting to be, and mostly through the off-system sales and contributing to that lower O&M expense are helping that picture of net income to be better, significantly better than we budgeted for. Net income for 2017 was budgeted to be $66.5 million. Right now, we're projecting it to be about $75 million. That's taking into account everything that's happened this year. Slightly higher revenues, but especially lower O&M expenses. That's contributing to that increase in net income for the end of the year. On the capital side, we enjoyed a warmer than usual November, and our crews have been out there doing a lot of work. If you remember well, back in the summer after the storm, we had to delay some projects, some capital projects, as we were recovering from the storm. November gave us a chance to continue advancing a lot of these capital projects, and we continue to do well in capital. Capital expenditures for November were $9.9 million, which is just $2.5 million under budget. That's just normal variations within the capital program, but certainly a good month for us to continue achieving our capital programs. Cash balance. The unrestricted cash balance at the end of November was $437.3 million. That's $57.4 million over budget. In the story, it follows the story of net revenues, where we had a good year. We sold power in the market, we got good results in the market, and compounded with that, we have been able to save money through operations. That's helping us end the year with a strong cash position. I would like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that our cash position at the end of the year is usually really strong, and that's by design. Because our largest payment of debt comes very shortly after the beginning of the year in February. We have to make a big payment in our debt service. So it's not uncommon for us to see cash accumulating through the end of the year on purpose, so that we can make a debt service payment at the end of the year. So all in all, a very positive month for the organization, and stable. We have a few days left in the fiscal year, and I am not expecting any variations. Not take wood, but I can come to the meeting next month and see what represents. With that, I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Is that one lump sum payment in February? How large is it, or what's it entail?
Principal and interest of our debt service, and I don't have the exact figure, but our total debt service is about $130 million for the year, and the bulk of that happens in February. That's when we make principal and interest payments. The other large payment happens in August, and that's mostly interest payments. And we have other principal and interest payments, smaller ones throughout the year, but our largest one. And it's not just one, we're paying off a bunch of different bonds. They all happen on that February.
And how about Fort Calhoun decommissioning fees? Are those annual or quarterly?
Those are monthly. On a monthly basis, we continue to collect revenues, and we continue to deposit those into our fund. And same thing on a monthly basis, we continue to spend money from the fund for decommissioning. So those happen throughout the year.
Okay.
Do you kind of true that up on a quarterly basis, or you have a big adjustment?
We true that up on a quarterly basis, and then at the end of the year, we true that up as well. And it has to do with mostly on the allocations, corporate allocations that happen. But we are truing that up on a quarterly basis.
Javier, bear with me. I'm trying to get my mind around the P&L statement, and I come from a manufacturing standpoint. It would be helpful to me as I read the operating statement here. There are charges to pension and charges to the decommissioning fund and all these other kind of charges. It would be helpful for me to see an operating statement that's just based on the operations of the business, and then below that, all those, I don't want to call them discretionary items, but let's say special items, that here's how the business performed period to period, and here's what we did with some other charges. That would be helpful for me to understand.
Happy to do that, and I would love to meet with you, and maybe we can go through that. The reason we do not present our financial statements in that format in this public meeting is because we don't have audited financial statements. We have 1 year-long audit at the end of the year. We don't even have quarterly audited financial statements, and from an SEC perspective and a municipal disclosure perspective, that's the reason why we don't share those out with the public, but I would be happy to share those with you.
Yeah. I don't want to put you to a lot of work, but it just helps me understand how the business is
Right.
performing and how the operations are performing.
We have that information.
Okay,
Happy to
thank you.
meet with you. I'll schedule something. One element that I didn't touch on in here, and it's not in your agenda, but it was on your director's report last week, was the successful pricing of our refunding bonds. Now, this is not a done deal. We're still working very hard, and I'm looking at Mr. Bruckner here. So with all the legal documents, we're scheduled to close the transaction on the 20th of December. But we successfully priced, we set interest rates for the series of refinancing bonds that we had presented to the board in September. To say it was a roller coaster is an understatement. Markets were very volatile. We were reacting on a day-to-day basis. As of Thursday morning, 2 weeks ago, we thought there was a higher chance that we would not go into the market because interest rates had continued to climb, and at some point it wasn't worth going into the refinancing. And then news happened. Lots of different news, financial-related news, political news happened, and the markets turned significantly, almost 180, the way I would describe it. And we were able to capture that, and we were ready. I think that's the value of being ready and just having a good name in the market where investors didn't take that long to analyze our credit. It's OPPD credit, good name in the market. We were able to, on Friday afternoon, we made a decision to go into the market on Monday. And we tested the waters on Monday morning, got really, really strong subscription for our bonds, and we were able to take advantage of that additional interest with lower interest rates for our ratepayers. In September, when I presented this opportunity, the way I described it was we would have an opportunity to refinance about $220 million of bonds. The authorization was up to $250. I presented here was about $220 million of bonds. Savings were between $6 million and $18 million net present value. That was our estimate in September. Well, we locked in $22.5 million of net present value savings. It was phenomenal, and it's something that, as I told the team, it pays to be good, but it's better to be lucky. And we actually got a really good run in the market, and we took advantage of that.
Maybe just the requests over the $220 million that you actually refinanced. We had requests of almost $2 billion, right?
Right. So going into the market, when we go into a strong market, we try not to push too hard. We want to make sure that as rates continue to drop, that we have enough investors willing to take those bonds at those already low interest rates. So we went in with an offering that we and our team of underwriters thought was appropriate for the tone of the market. And as we went into the market, our surprise was that actually interest rates hadn't bottomed out. There were still interest rates were continuing to drop down, which meant that at some point we got almost 10 times more orders for bonds than we had bonds to sell. It's not a bad place to be in the market, because that allowed us then throughout the pricing period to continue lowering rates, dropping investors off until we got the last few that were willing to take the very lowest interest rate. So that was, again, good name of OPPD, investors willing to buy our bonds, but also taking advantage of a market that was going in our favor, locking in those rates for our customer owners. So very proud of the team, very proud of OPPD. Again, it speaks volumes, the fact that we could go within a day's notice into the market with an offering this large, and investors are familiar with the credit, they're comfortable with the credit, and they're willing to buy the bonds.
What was the term on those bonds?
They mature in different places. The longest was maturing in 2042, so a 25-year bond, but we had different maturities, ranging between 15 and 25 years.
Is that because of the removing the tax exemption on public financing rumors, or is that going to happen, or what's the deal?
That I believe that helped. One of the reasons we had there were a lot of issuers coming into the market that were probably reacting to the potential changes in the tax code. Our transaction made sense before those changes were announced. We asked for approval in September, way before these tax reform changes were announced. So we were already planning on doing these. The tax reform changes probably precipitated a lot of other issuers going into the market in December, and it allowed us then to go in first. before the market was flooded with a lot of bonds. And I believe that was a good strategy, and it benefited us.
And just to thank the board for their early authorization.
Yes.
For us to do that gives us a lot of flexibility. You can see the fruits of that flexibility in the market, but just it will be accomplished here by December 20th.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, good news, thank you. Any other questions on the financial report? We'll move on. I know we have a executive session. We're going to talk about our risk management in the exec session. On the corporate operating plan, there's an action item. Do you want to say anything about that now, or should we?
I can. We presented the draft corporate operating plan a month ago. We left it open for almost a month, almost 30 days, and we didn't really receive any public comment. I received a few questions from a few directors, and I've been able to respond to those successfully. Director Yoder sent me a few questions yesterday, and I still have some answers to you, but I don't have anything changed, anything new from what I presented last.
Let's just do this. It's best anyway. It's a public meeting on Thursday. When it's covered there, or any questions that come up between now and then, we'll bring them up then. So,
quick question: if you've got preliminaries removed from this draft, just curious, any noteworthy changes that we need to be aware of? Or
editorial, spelling out, tying out footnotes, but nothing worth noting here at this point.
So everyone review that in the next couple days, and if you got any other questions, we can do that Thursday and take as much time as we need to cover that. And there's public input on that as well. Right. So there'll be public questions too, possibly, maybe not. Anticipated expenditures reimbursement is an action item. Are you going to talk about that now? It's a board action item.
I will explain that one.
Yeah.
This is a resolution that we ask the board to approve every year. Under IRS rules, Internal Revenue Service rules, in order for an entity like OPPD to borrow, to issue debt on a tax-exempt basis, the board or the governing body has to approve those capital expenditures if you want to reimburse yourself with tax-exempt bonds. The corporate operating plan does not plan to issue any new debt to finance our capital. However, this is something that we do out of caution. If needed, we want to make sure that we have the authority to issue tax-exempt debt if needed throughout the year. So this is a resolution that we've asked the board to approve every year, say declaring our intent to reimburse for capital expenditures that will happen in 2018 with tax-exempt debt if needed. And right now, I'm not anticipating that need. We're fully planning on issuing funding capital projects with cash, but if needed, this resolution would fulfill that requirement.
Okay. Any questions now on that?
I have a process question. So I appreciate that you're asking for authority up front, and that's fine. Say it was not given, is there a workaround process, or would you just come at a later time and say, hey, we need it?
So what happens with reimbursement resolutions, the way OPPD and most other utilities that I'm aware of, when we borrow money, you borrow in arrears. It's very different than a school district, for example, where if you're issuing bonds to build a new school district, you typically issue the resolution, say we're going to build whatever it is, that capital project, and then you declare your intent to issue bonds. For entities like ours that are highly capital intensive, it is not uncommon for you to incur in those capital projects first, and then as the year goes by, you issue debt to reimburse yourself. So this is very, very important because we have to have a resolution in place, especially because if the capital expenditure happens first and then you issue the debt after the fact, you need to have a resolution. Without getting into the technical, there are some time frames in there, but you have to have a resolution saying you intended all the time to reimburse yourself with tax-exempt debt. Yeah.
And then we heard in a little bit, but we'll move on to nuclear oversight. Mary and John, you want to start out and brief us what's happening?
Good morning.
Good morning.
A few things to report in terms of decommissioning. We did have our final 2017 Decommissioning Oversight Committee come in. Just to remind you, they're an outside entities. 3 different people came in with different expertise. One was ex-NRC administration, so very high up in the NRC. The other one is a practitioner, has done 3 decommissionings and sits on various boards now. And then we also had an expert come in who has project management and security expertise, and kind of delve into those a little bit deeper this go around. As the committee exited, I think there was a lot of good. There were also suggestions for things that we can improve, which is what we pay them to tell us. But overall, I think the finding was that we are on track. We can continue to have very good progress in the decommissioning, and they continue to give us very good value for the money that we spend bringing them in and giving us things to think about going forward, things to do better. And we take all of those and we address those issues. And that was also noted as they exited, that we're very responsive to the things that they leave us with. So. Second thing I wanted to mention was we've also completed any radioactive waste shipments that we've had for the year. There's been a number of those this year. We will continue that. That is part of the decommissioning progress. But I want to just let you know that all of those were done safely and successfully this year. And last but not least, we have one milestone 8 exemption requests that came in from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. This exemption request just pushes our compliance date out from 12/31/17 to 12/31/18. We also have an exemption request in to change the commitment that we have for milestone 8, but it was going to take the commission longer to approve that than by the end of the year, so they just pushed the date out. So that came in.
Mary, do you want to describe a little bit what that is?
Yeah,
Just
milestone
so.
8, I'm sorry, is cybersecurity requirements.
Yeah, thank you.
And so there were 8 milestones that the commission put in place, and 7 of those have been completed. The 8th one was due to be completed by the end of the year. And as I said, we've asked for some exemptions regarding that compliance, and that will come early next year, so they just pushed this commitment date out to the end of the year. And then last but not least, what wasn't on the report but came in yesterday was the emergency plan exemption request that we had filed with the commission almost a year ago was approved as of yesterday or the day before. And that's a milestone. What that does is that once we get through April 7th or April 8th, we will no longer need an emergency response plan due to the accident conditions that can occur at the facility that requires off-site response. And so that will be reduced as of April 8th, upcoming next year. So that's a big milestone for us. I wanted to report that out today as well. I'll move to the people issues for a minute. We currently have 385 employees. We anticipate attrition through the end of the year to take us down to about 380. And then we had over the 2016 and 2017, we've had 124 resignations, 59 retirements, 61 terminations, and 57 transfers within OPPD. So we continue to track and monitor those numbers. We have put in place an option for some of the Fort Calhoun employees to be able to take early retirement, and so we're working through that process. So we anticipate a number of people will take that on probably February 1st of next year.
All right. Any questions?
I just want to mention that Mary and her team were kind enough to take a small group from Blair, the mayor, and several other community leaders. I hadn't been in the plant. I don't know if I was in it this year, early maybe, and the dramatic change inside, the asbestos removal, the heavy equipment, vacating the office, general office, and you're doing a lot of work, and congratulations. And congratulations to the folks out at FCS, because they're just turning that thing into something completely different.
Great. Thank you, Director Wayne.
Yeah.
John, do you have anything?
Yeah, just real quick, Director Gay, a couple items that were in flight during the last board meeting. Nuclear Oversight did complete a decommissioning unit program audit, and we found that the site does effectively implement the regulatory requirements of the Quality Assurance Topical Report, also known as the QATR program elements. So that went well. We also completed a check of the procedures and programs at Fort Calhoun, and any references to Exelon, those were removed. And Mary and her team have signed an agreement with Exelon that will basically absolve us of that commitment going forward. So there will be cost savings there at the end of the year. And finally, we did do a management-directed assessment of the station's decommissioning efforts with respect to the first quarter NRC planned inspection, and found that to be in compliance with where we're headed there with the NRC inspection plan for the first quarter. So,
Thanks, John. Any questions for John?
Yeah, I have a question. Hey, there were two groups that were competing to do decommissioning act. One was Exelon, and we went with a group called Energy Solutions or something. How are they working out?
Very good. Yeah, Energy Solutions is working out very well. We utilize them in a consulting role on a day-to-day basis. We also utilize their knowledge and expertise to help us with the Radway shipments. They're very much involved in what we do on a day-to-day basis, but also on those large evolutions that we are doing. They help us to think ahead as to the right way to do things, or ways that we would do maybe different than an online plant would do. Mm-hmm. So they're really helping us to kind of change the culture up there as well. So I think we've gotten a lot of value from having them here over the past year.
How many employees are on site with Energy Solutions?
We've contracted to have 6 employees there, and there are 6 employees there.
Okay.
I would just add, this was one of our conversations. I can't remember if it was in our last town hall or the previous
Director
town hall.
McGuire asked at the DOC.
Yeah, at the DOC on how Energy Solutions was doing to the team, and the team responded very favorably on their response. Energy Solutions happened to be in the room too, so it was kind of their self-assessment in the decommissioning oversight process, but it was very positive, and the employees were very complimentary of the expertise that they're bringing and assisting and helping, and the relationship role that we have there. And I know Director Trinan was there as well as others. So.
Great. Anything else? See, so we'll move on to Public Information Committee. Director Kavanaugh.
We just have the one item that we're going to get an update on. Both state and federal legislation is coming up in 2018. We have Tom Richards here to handle the state side, and Seth Voiles to handle the federal side. And who's going to bet first? Looks like Tom is, apparently.
Seniority knows. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to share with you where we've been during the interim and where we're going in 2018 as far as what I can tell at this point. Where we've been in 2018 is we monitored interim studies. There were a number of interim studies, the biggest one dealing with deregulation and changes in the public power structure. That was LR 125. That was a hearing back in September. It went very well. I would report that, at least from a committee standpoint and the Natural Resources Committee, there seems to be very little interest in deregulating the electric utility industry in Nebraska. I think it was pretty resounding on a committee level that there's not a lot of interest in doing that. As an effort to educate senators, we went on a tour. Tim, Lisa, Seth, and I, we met with about 20 senators. Most of them from the service territory that we serve, but a number of them from outside of the service territory as well. And we got a lot of good feedback and response from them about public power, and particularly OPPD and how we're operating. And lastly, last week we had an NPA, Nebraska Power Association legislative retreat, where we started to preview the 2018 session. And that's what I'll share with you next, is the preview of the 2018 session. The overarching issues for the legislature are going to be 2 things primarily. One is property tax and income tax relief. That will take front and center stage as far as things that go on in the legislature. And the second thing is there's an anticipated another $100 million shortfall in the budget, and they're going to figure out how they're going to deal with that. If you remember right, I think it was close to $900 million they took out of the budget last year. So another $100 million is revenue short this following year, and that's going to be a big overarching issue. Some of the issues of importance to OPPD, we are preparing a piece of legislation that we're going to introduce about obstructing a public power worker. We've had situations in the field where people have been threatened. They have been obstructed from doing their jobs. We're working on a piece of legislation to create the offense of obstructing a public power worker. It's Class 1 misdemeanor, meaning that it's punishable by a $1,000 fine or a year in jail. We didn't want to do a felony because there's a number of felonies on the books already, and the response to doing a felony charge would probably be very small because of the initiatives about reducing prison population. But we think this is a good first step to look at, obstructing a public power worker in his or her job. And we're working, and Steve and I are working on a draft for that right now. The second bill has to do with salvaging metals, primarily copper and catalytic converters. Over the years, we've had a number of problems with copper being stolen from our facilities. I don't think we have the issue that we've had in the past. A couple of years ago, we passed a law that created a felony. It's called the Infrastructure Protection Act, about stealing copper out of critical facilities that OPPD owns, electric and utility zone. And that seems to have slowed that down. The group that's behind this is CenturyLink. CenturyLink has some facilities that have been vandalized recently, and they're looking to change some of the salvage laws as they are on the books today. Senator Blood has a drone bill regulating drones. She has an exemption in there for public power or utilities in general to do our job. There's a piece in there still that talks about 24-hour notice. Our engineering guys aren't on board with that. We've let Senator Blood know that, and she is working with us to try to make some changes to the bill. And lastly, bills that will carry over are going to be heard right out of the chute. LB 494 is a bill on cybersecurity and personnel security. That's a carryover from last year that we continue to work on. And the NPA, the Power Association, is steadily behind that, and we continue to take step forwards to try to implement some cybersecurity and personnel security purposes for OPPD. That's a quick overview. I'll take some questions or comments.
Hey, Tom, you say you had 20-some senators. That's a really good turnout for tours or whatever. Did you do those individually or by groups or one big group? Wow, that's a lot of work. Good job.
Sit down and talk about solar power, right? And then we also talked about all the initiatives OPPD is doing. So got very favorable comments from the senators.
Yeah, that's good, especially with this term limits. I mean, it's just that turnover. It's an educational component all the time. So that's a great job getting almost half the legislature.
In some of those visits, we actually took some of our union leadership as well, because these are common issues that impact our employees as well, and it was a great opportunity for us to, actually I think they were kind of surprised that you would have a management group and a labor group. One senator said, I've never seen that before, but it was really about the nature of public power and the benefit of public power, and we were there kind of in forces joined, so appreciate the leadership participating in those meetings as well.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we also went out to the senator's district, so we came to them.
Just let them know what's going on.
Yep.
The session starts January 3rd. It's a 60-day session. It'll be done April 17th. The first 10 days of legislation, they introduce new bills for the second session, but the carryover bills can take place right away. So probably the first report that I do with you all in January will be a report on what's moving forward from carryover bills. We'll be evaluating any new bills that come in, and we'll probably by February have new bills. And if there's something very critical, we'll get that information quicker. But January will be pretty much a reporting of what's going on, and by February we'll have an evaluation of the bills that are being introduced and as we move forward.
Hey, Tom.
And we'll do our matrix.
Okay, I think last year there were several questions about how do we get more involved, or prior to the legislation being already killed or heard or whatever, how we form our support or opposition. I know the NPA is important, but is there any, you got any, did you want to talk about that?
Well, I was just going to, yeah, great point. Can you just remind us, Tom, of the process that you go through both internally and with the NPA to arrive at a position on a particular bill?
So internally, what happens is bills get introduced. Steve, I, a variety of people around the room, evaluate them for impact to the district. That's the first thing that we do. The NPA evaluates on a weekly basis once bills are introduced. We meet on a regular basis weekly to evaluate overarching industry issues as well. We try to coordinate positions with the NPA. At times we are off positions, but very rarely does that happen. I take my recommendations and evaluations to senior management, run them by senior management, kind of formulate what our recommendations of the board are, and then I bring those forward in January and February for your input as far as what we're doing and how we're operating.
Yeah, I would just give you just a quick example. So LB 824, which was the Wind for Export bill that Senator McAllister most keenly introduced, and I think initially the NPA took an opposed position, and we took a neutral position, OPPD perspective-wise, and I'll tell you, I think we were able to change the ongoing position of NPA to just monitor, right, or neutral. That legislation really drove the development of what's occurring with Facebook, to be very honest with you. And so if we wouldn't have changed our position, or at least taken our position to move it to a neutral role, Senator McAllister's bill might have been, you know, essentially not made it through committee and not made it and approved. And so if it wasn't for him getting with us and us understanding what the full impact could be long-term, that was one where we were initially against what the NPA was doing, and then the NPA decided to move to a neutral position, I believe, at the end of the day.
They did.
So that was very positive, and he was very key to that bill. And so
just as a reminder, confirmation, the board has delegated responsibility to management to determine what those are. So when you say bring recommendations to the board, you're really bringing what you're planning to do for our input.
That's correct.
But it's something we delegated to management.
So,
doesn't that also go to the public information? Did you discuss that in public information
we
committee?
Do.
That's discussed in the public information committee, which is now here.
Which is now, right.
right.
It would be nice to get that a little bit earlier. Like, you know, it used to be that we would have this, you know, sort of one-on-one, a little bit meeting ahead of time on what's going on, and then to discuss it. I don't know, but that
this
has
will
to
be really quick in January, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, these first couple meetings things are changing every single day. So as others can attest to. So, you know, certainly in January we'll give you the best information we have. And I think even last year we were doing some weekly things through you know, some information to the board. So we'll try to do that as well as things change. If there's no change, then we'll just tell you there's no change. If there are some changes in bills that have been introduced or positions that we've taken, we'll certainly share what those look like and then have a conversation at our board meeting.
Sure.
Our January committee and board meetings are about at the time, at the end of the 10-day periods for new legislation, right? Is it 10 calendar days or 10 business days?
10 legislative days.
Okay, so that'd be about the middle of the month then, cutoff is for proposing new stuff. Okay.
And usually what happens is the last 2 days, things seem to get introduced that impact us, so it puts it even in more of a crunch. So.
Certainly all the retail competition bills and some of the other unbundling bills occurred.
They were in the last 10
kind of
bills
in the
introduced.
last 10 minutes of filing. So.
Generally speaking, isn't it true historically that unless something extremely critical to the state at that time, it's difficult in this second year of the session to get new legislation for it to get much traction, generally speaking, right, Tom?
Correct.
Okay.
That's why we're doing one piece that we're working on. I've met with Senator Chambers, I've met with Senator Ebke, I've met with a number of people to lay the groundwork to try to get that done. It's still going to be an uphill climb, but you know, you do your footwork before that. You try not to take something that's too controversial before the body at that point.
Okay.
Long sessions when you do major initiatives.
Hey, Tom, quick question. There was some discussion in the last session about prohibition on wind farms in the Sandhills, and I think it was Senator Brewer. Has that evolved into anything?
So at the LR 125 hearing, the hearing on retail choice and other matters, Senator, I'm losing his name right now, from
Brewer.
Hughes, thank you, carried part of the hearing to deal with that. Well, that hearing was taken over by proponents of the idea of a wind moratorium in the Sandhills. He let them, it was supposed to be a short testify, but it turned into a full show at that point. There seems to be some interest in that, people who live in the Sandhills. I don't think there's a real interest on the committee at this point to move that forward. That's still in committee, that moratorium bill. And I don't think there's a lot of, even ones that aren't pleased with wind development, I think they see the economic impact it's had on their neighborhoods. And I think it's really tough to put that moratorium in place. Not to say that it can't happen, but I would say that the committee at this point doesn't want to, is probably not going to bring that out of committee, especially in a short session.
And I would just say in our conversation with wind developers, they understand the sensitivity that the folks living in the Sand Hills have, and that's why you saw the Shoals project probably closer to Wayne, Nebraska, and so they understand kind of what's going on, and so we'll continue that discussion with them. They don't want to trigger any major issues either. So
if you look at the history of that group, I mean, low-level waste was going to be in the Sandhills and met with a lot of opposition. The Keystone Pipeline was in that area, and that met with a lot of opposition. So they're a very organized group, but there's also people that are seeing the benefits from wind development as well.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to testify in that hearing on behalf of the NPA, and it was interesting. By the time I got back to my office the next day, I had proponents of the moratorium sending me emails, and also those that support wind in the Sand Hills sending me emails as well, and some of them were very complimentary and some of them were not very complimentary, but they questioned my mother heritage and everything else. So but outside of that, that's just the difference of those positions. So
we will do our best to analyze quickly and get you information as fast as we can.
Tom, quick question. And the deregulation of public power, how has that evolved?
Well, how's it? Where do I think it stands this year?
Yeah. So where does it stand today?
I think there's very little interest from the committee standpoint. That's the first thing you look at is does the committee have an interest in doing that? That's not to say somebody from the outside. We've got no indication at this point that a senator is going to reintroduce those bills.
Okay.
So the committee has very little interest in hearing that bill again. They have very little interest in moving that bill again, but that's not to say that it can't happen. But the intelligence that we have at this point, that is not going to occur. Not to say that there might be something around the edges, but that major piece of legislation, I've got no information at this point that that's going to happen again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Next, we have Seth Boyles, who is a brand new father.
So congratulations, Seth.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's been kind of a whirlwind year in D.C. This is my 20th year of doing federal issues, and this year has probably been the most chaotic, unstructured year there is, and that's saying something for D.C. because it's just kind of where we are.
Why?
I'm gonna focus on just realistically three things. That one is major going on right now, tax reform that we all know about. One bill about the Stafford Act, which is going on about hazard mitigation with all the hurricanes and everything that have hit the country and the devastation there. And then one that starts and sputters on spent nuclear fuel, because that's what's happening now and that's what is kind of what's going forward. There haven't been a lot of victories or anything in D.C., so there's been a big push on tax reform. It started with a big push, kind of fizzled out, and then all of a sudden it just started going really quickly. So on background, the House has passed their bill, the Senate passed their bill very quickly, not a lot of bipartisan support across the way. Actually, there's none. But they're doing this on reconciliation orders, and what that means is that you only need 51 votes in the Senate to pass it, and it kind of sets very strict budget rules to get this stuff through. So the part that's important for us that are impacting us, number one, there is no tax on muni bonds. That was a very concerted effort across public power, but not just public power, it's schools, hospitals, roads, state government. Very good push about that and saying don't tax muni bonds, because if you tax something, there's going to be less of it, and that's how we're going to build infrastructure. So that was a good win for all of us. The other parts that are a little bit more concerning, there's a repeal of advanced refundings. So basically, you can't refinance one of your bonds with another bond. As of right now, that's in both bills. Since they couldn't go after the tax, put a tax on muni bonds, this is how they kind of did it on this side. It's one of those issues that not a lot of people were tracking. We've known about it for about a year, letting people know on the Hill, and they were like, well, why would they do that? That's just bad policy, but they did it anyway.
And said, just a correction, you can still advance a bond
With another bond, just you cannot do it that far in advance.
Yeah,
We will have to
it's a
wait
90-day.
until the bonds are almost ready to be called for us to refinance. So the opportunity to refinance bonds is still there. It would be lesser than the one that we have today.
And you could also do it, but it'd have to be like with a taxable bond, which just wouldn't be good to do right now. So, so that's in both bills now. We are trying to alter that. There's a big push to do that. There was a push to try to take that out of both bills. That is not probably going to happen. The other is to extend the date out to 2018, because right now the moratorium would be on December 31st, 2017. We're trying to push that out to 2018. The other is to grandfather in all existing bonds and only do this for new issuances of bonds. We're not sure where those things are going, but that's all in the conference committee. The conference committee now is a small group of senators and members of the House that are trying to iron out all of the issues that are there. The conference committee is supposed to wrap up this week, which is going to be pretty fast and furious. There have been a lot of reports that issues have been starting to pop up because of that time frame. Staff are getting tired. I've heard from a couple staffers that I know that are working on this that 18-hour days of actual just sitting in the room working. They're making errors on certain things. That's where they're going to try to iron out some of this stuff. There's a lot of press reports on there and those kind of things, but that's what the conference committee is supposed to do. So that's supposed to be done by the end of the week. Voting on it next week, we'll see how that's going to work. Another provision in there for us is the wind PTC. The House of Representatives put in a provision in there that they're repealing the inflation adjustment. So that takes the wind PTC from 24 cents down to 14. That's very concerning. The other bigger concerning part is about getting rid of the safe harbor agreements. So what it says is that you can't have a safe harbor agreement, and that is if you put 5% down on a wind farm, you get the tax credit for when you put that money down on it. They're also getting rid of that, so now it's going to, the way you start to where you're going to be, where you will qualify for the PTC is that when you start construction to the end of construction with no delays. So that's how that's going to be to do that. So if you have a safe harbor agreement, there's questions on how that's going to work, because most times you already have signed contracts, but that's why it's very concerning on that part of it. But that's only in the House bill. On the Senate side, there is no provision on that, which is good. Senator Chuck Grassley out of Iowa, Republican congressman, he's the Judiciary Chair, used to be the Chair of the Finance Committee, is a very staunch supporter of renewable energy, especially the wind PTC, and he has vowed he's going to throw his weight around in the Conference Committee because he is on it. He is saying that people should be embarrassed about putting it in there because he has had an agreement that, you know, before, the only way the phase out came on stepping down the tax credit before that everyone agreed to was because of him. He had agreements with the Treasury Secretary and everyone, so he's going to do all he can to get that kicked out of the conference. We feel that he can do that because he's in a very safe seat, and in the Senate you need 51 votes. They already have one, and that means you're going to lose 2 Republican senators, and that's it. So they've already lost one. Senator Bob Corker out of Tennessee. Senator Susan Collins out of Maine is wavering right now because she thought she had commitments with both the House and Senate about taking care of the ACA and the individual mandate for health care. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said, yes, we have that agreement. Speaker Paul Ryan said, I've never made any agreement whatsoever. So if that stays in, we might lose her, so it's already 50-50 at that point. So we're going to see where that's going to go. The other wild card is today, the Alabama Senate election is up. So who knows what's going to happen there? That could also throw this into chaos. So we'll see how that's going to go from there. The other issue that we have, and we think it's been resolved, are the Build America bonds. We do have some Build America bonds here. Along with the rules on reconciliation and how this is all going, the issue is that some people feel this is going to trigger sequestration, which is mandatory spending cuts on a lot of things. If that happens, the subsidy on Build America bonds is usually reduced. Both the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker Paul Ryan have said that will not happen. So they have vowed that that's not going to happen, so we're taking them at their word. They've told us many times. So that's pretty good that that's not going to happen on there. So those are the major provisions that we are following on tax reform, and so far it's not too bad of where we're sitting now. We'll see that, but like I said, we're going to get going from there. But that's kind of where we are there on that side. So any questions on taxes? Then I'll move on to the other things. Well, on another side note on taxes, well, the Cadillac tax, which is one of the taxes that's going to impact us, looks like they're going to try to address that next year, either a delay, another 2-year delay, or a full-out repeal from the House of Representatives. We'll see if that's going to go. It's hard to do things on even-numbered years in D.C. because they're election years. So, but on this one, everyone seems to not like the Cadillac tax. The unions don't like it. It's just kind of universal across the board there for that.
Seth, maybe explain what the Cadillac tax is.
Oh, it's a tax on high. So all our healthcare things here. So if you have more than 100 employees, it's one of just the taxes that's going to help pay for the Affordable Care Act to help with the subsidies on there. It's kind of how they've generated some of their money. It's been very controversial because it really impacts large organizations, companies, but it also impacts employees. So that's why the unions and everyone's come out against it, because they're like, this isn't the way we really want to do this. It's getting more expensive for us, and premiums are going up, and healthcare is going down. This is part of the reason they don't like it. So there have been vows across the board during the presidential election. Both Trump and Clinton were like, yeah, we don't like this thing at all. If you get those two to support something together, it's kind of one of those anomalies in D.C. that makes it a little odd. So.
Or would that be part of a
They'll probably do it independently, because there's a lot of times with budget rules that it's hard to do. So they can't do it on tax reform because with the board rule, which is you can't have any kind of issues 10 years out affecting the deficit. So they can't put it in there on those kind of things. They could do it all one-offs, and it's a little bit harder to do. But if you say, well, we're going to tax your constituents this much if you don't support this, it's easier to do it as a one-off afterward instead of putting it on the bigger package.
And it wouldn't be part of a broader healthcare reform package either.
Probably not. They've tried that a couple times, and it hasn't worked out too well. They will probably try it again, but I think what ends up happening is they'll throw whatever they can to see what sticks on healthcare. Most of it doesn't, but they might do it with whatever other kind of medical taxes they can do and try to pair it with something smaller, but they just don't know what that's going to look like yet. And again, it's an election year, so it's going to be tough to do that as well. But they do want to make the effort to try, so at least that's what the House has said, especially. All right, the other one, Stafford Act. As we all know, a lot of hurricanes, tornadoes, everything coming through this year. They've been very devastating, especially for Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and the way that we've addressed that has been scrutinized, because it's been a little tough, especially for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, because they were almost full devastation. So the Stafford Act is what kind of helps pay for that with FEMA and everything. It's usually we get 75 cents on the dollar to put everything back up as soon as they want. Most times when these things happen, like with Hurricane Sandy, they're like, hey, get the power on yesterday. So the way we do that fast is you put it up exactly the way it was, because that's what you know. It's easier to do, it's faster, it's that way. So what they want to do now with this is they're looking at different ways to harden the system and to focus more on resiliency instead of just expediency. So the way that they're really doing that is they're allowing some of the Stafford Act monies to be used as pre-mitigation. So you do it beforehand. So if the hurricane season's coming up and you need to do this, you can get some FEMA money to start doing that to harden the system, so we don't have to keep going through this cycle every single time we do it. They're also going to try to raise the number up from 75% up to maybe 85 or 100%. Those are all negotiations that are going to be going on. Anytime there's like natural disasters and that stuff in DC is very good at reacting quickly, but then it stops, and then they start scrutinizing a little bit more, and then all of a sudden it just kind of peters out again. So this is one of those examples. This bill was introduced on 11/28, passed out of committee on 11/30. So it's going to be going to the floor very quickly. So there's going to be more scrutiny when it gets through the House. It'll probably get through the House at some point in the near future. When it gets to the Senate, they'll look at it a little bit more in depth to see, because we're kind of out of the hurricane season now. So they're going to look at more of that. But it's not just for hurricanes, it's for tornadoes, it's going to be for extreme snow events, all those kind of things across the board to see where that's going to go. So we've been watching that very well, so because that affects what we do.
So Seth, is this going to be labeled infrastructure, and is this going to be their infrastructure effort, or is it standalone?
This is mainly about the mitigation efforts of what happened for the hurricane season, because there have been a lot of scrutiny on Puerto Rico especially, and that has really shined a light on how the difficulties on how some of these programs are administered. So with Puerto Rico, they're already asking, I think they're asking for another close to $100 billion. That's what Puerto Rico and them have requested. The administration came in saying they'll give 40-some, and the House is like, you're going to get a lot more than that, because we also have to still have Texas, we have the Virgin Islands, we have a lot of these things to do. But the controversy now is on the contracts that happen for Puerto Rico. So you have Whitefish that nobody knew about them, two-man operation, got a $300 million contract. You have a group named Cobra down there that was like established within the year. They got a large, I think it was $200 million for them, and then just nothing was happening. The mutual aid agreements that went unanswered from APPA, NRECA, the co-ops, and EEI, the investor owns, they just went unanswered, so they couldn't get them down there on the ground. There was actual people waiting in Florida with their trucks to go. They're like, you got to talk to Whitefish. So that's how this kind of came about, to do that sort of thing.
So two things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where I was trying to head was, I understood that after the tax bill, the next big initiative is infrastructure. So I was wondering if this is how they're going to do that. Sounds like it's going to be a separate.
Yep, it'll be separate.
Which is great. And then, sure, I think any kind of funding that comes out of the Stafford Act that supports the redesign for resiliency and hardening the system isn't just going to go to those, well, isn't going to just go to those areas that are hit by hurricane. Is it going to be grid-wide, or,
It'll
for example?
be for if you, and this is where the whole kind of thing that we're trying to get our hands around is, it's mainly for if you are in areas that do get hit. So the coastal areas will be the number one because they get the bigger storms, but if you get a bad snowstorm that you've had a history of these things happening, tornadoes, any kind of natural disasters, those kind of things, you can apply for it all the same. But the way it's going to trigger and everything is what we're really looking at, because we just don't, getting a bill out in 2 days on those kind of things, you're missing pieces. That's why we're going to go in and see exactly how it's all going to work, because there are a lot of moving parts, and that's kind of fluid right now on what they need to do. Right now, it's mainly focused on the coasts. We want to make sure it's focused on everything so that everyone that has these kind of issues, regardless of what kind of issue it is, that we all can partake in the same way.
Sure. We've seen floods. We've seen
right.
F4, was it? Tornadoes.
1 and 2.
Yeah. So certainly. So then the question on your actions are you working with, say, APPA and several others on?
Yeah, working with APPA. Since it got out of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee so quickly, we're going to be working on it with the Senate folks on the other side when it goes through their committee stuff there. And it's mainly going to be working with the committee staff, our delegation, but a lot of times it's committee staff and leadership staff, because they're the ones that can really affect the change quicker than the other folks. We'll work through the delegation as well to get them to help on those kind of things, but we're also going to come at it on a lot of different angles, so we just don't work directly through our delegation.
And do other professional associations have government committees that work on this, like RMEL, or no?
Not necessarily RMEL.
Okay.
They're not a legislative arm, but LPPC is a good example.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, I would say EEI.
Yeah, EEI will, NRECA as well, because with the Stafford Act, it's mainly for public power, so it's mainly NRECA and APPA. There have been some instances that they've allowed investor-owned utilities to use to get in on some of the resiliency thing as well. Maybe not Stafford Act stuff, but letting them use tax-exempt bonds to help with some of their reconstruction, just to get it done quicker and cheaper. So yeah, we are keeping an eye on all those kind of things there. And it's a good question, because this, realistically, it is related to infrastructure. So if it doesn't get done this way and the infrastructure bill does start moving, this could become a part of it. But I have a feeling this is probably going to go faster than the infrastructure bill, because the infrastructure bill is just so big. And to pay for that after you've done tax reform, where you took all the pay-fors away, it's just going to be a lot more expensive to do it. That's the big question on infrastructure right now, is how do you pay for that part of it after you take all the pay-fors for tax reform? So we'll have to see how that's going to go.
I think in our example is, we came to the board several months ago on a 345 line that we're rebuilding. and we're increasing the resiliency. So we're going from wood poles to steel, and so that'll be completed before our kind of storm season in June. And Mo and his team are working through that, and so we're going to request that that increased resiliency get paid for or supported by some of the things that Seth is just talking about. And so we're trying to build our own resiliency on some of those older infrastructure lines.
Sure, and there are also resiliency components that I think we'll probably hear about today with the IEM, perhaps.
Maybe.
And the other thing is too is that it usually takes a little bit of time to get the money. So that's another thing they're trying to do is speed it up, because this stuff happens, we pay for it to get fixed, and then the federal government's like, hey, thanks, check's in the mail. Where is it though?
Yeah.
So those kind of things as well.
It's a short time frame in committee. Did it get through because it was handwritten and nobody could read it, or was there bipartisan support? Or
it was bipartisan support. The handwritten one was more tax reform.
Yeah, it was a joke.
Yeah, but it actually was the thing, because they were down on the floor, and I was. My wife made fun of me. I think a lot of people she was texting all my friends making fun of me because. 12:30 at night on Friday night, I'm watching C-SPAN, and I'm like, "This is awesome." And my wife was like, "What the heck are you doing?" But anyway, so this one has very good bipartisan support. It flew through committee because it's affecting everybody. These storms, it's not a partisan issue for them. They just want to get the things out as fast as they can and get the help as fast as they can, because we've had examples of it before. When New Orleans got hit, it took 5 days to get water to the Superdome. When Superstorm Sandy hit, there was just a lot of chaos on how to get people where they needed to go. There was issues just across the board that they tried to resolve. So they've been doing these little one-offs now, and now they're just like, we're just going to do it full cloth and really put some better foundation on this. So that's why it went by so quickly, and it's going to go through fast as well in the House, because the House can just move that fast. In the Senate, they just can't. So in the Senate, they will refine more of what it is so we can scrutinize it a little bit better. Because when it comes out in the committee like that and they're saying, oh, we're introducing it today, and by the way, in 2 days we're going to vote on it, you already know that the vote's baked and everything's good to go, and we're not going to be able to do any changes, because they're just going to say, look, don't upset the apple cart, we'll deal with it when it gets to the floor. And then it'll come up to the floor and they're like, look, don't upset the apple cart, we'll just deal with it when it gets to the Senate side. And then by that time, you've already lost the opportunity because they don't want the change. So.
And will that have to go to Congress committee as well?
It will when it gets to the Senate and they change it. Yeah, so, and I have a feeling most times the Senate now is going to change it. The House, there's a lot of frustrations between the two bodies because the House is churning out a lot of stuff and the Senate just can't do it yet. It's just too much chaos over there on those kind of things. So, all right. You're welcome. The last bill I want to talk about was, it's on spent nuclear fuel. Representative Shimkus has a bipartisan bill on how to get the whole program re-going on fuel management, on Yucca Mountain, on interim storage, and just getting everything started again, and oddly enough, he's trying to take the politics out of it. So his bill that he has moved through the committee on a bipartisan basis. They want to get it to the floor by the end of the year. It's very difficult to do that right now because the House Appropriations Committee has a problem with the bill because it takes 20% of the funding on this and makes it mandatory spending. The reason they want it to be mandatory spending is because at that point you take the politics out of the appropriators' hands and out of those things on the discretionary funding, and it makes it to where you have to spend the money on the programs, and that's on interim storage, just on getting the program moving again, because right now it's just so marred in politics, nothing is really going. So, we've been contacted by the Energy and Commerce Committee to try to help get the appropriators to kind of just get together to see if there's a way they could all come to an agreement to get it to the floor. Because once it gets to the Senate, there's going to be a whole long other debate on the Senate side on how this is going to work. Senator Dean Heller is in a very tough race in Nevada. The Republican majority doesn't want to give him any tough votes. The House doesn't care anymore. There's like, we need to address this now because the politics have marred this so badly that we're just stuck. You know, this fuel is stuck on site, and there's no site, and there's nothing going on in the future to try to address it. So they've been trying as hard as they can to do that. You know, this is going to move Yucca Mountain licensing forward, or at least try to. It's going to proceed with consolidated interim storage planning, which is important for us. It's going to prohibit DOE from restarting the nuke waste fund fees, which is good for us, but it's really going to be that 20% mandatory spending, which is going to be the big part for that. So they're hopeful they can get that to the floor this year because the House doesn't need a lot of time for it since it is such a big bipartisan bill. Because there's a lot of people with a lot of waste all over the place. They just want it out of their states and somewhere. So we're working on that as well. We've taken a look at that, and we're good with all the aspects of it. It would help us in the future. So those are the three main things right now that are going on in D.C. from now in January even into the first quarter that'll be going on. You know, they're still dealing with trying not to shut down the government by the 22nd. They're hopefully going to get that punted to January. Then they'll try to punt that again. They have to do something on Dreamers. They have to do something on the debt ceiling again. There's a lot of other bigger issues that they're having to deal with than some of these things. But these are the things that impact us that they could get done. Easy to do. Energy bill, stuck. Nice bipartisan bill in the Senate. They just can't find the time to do it. So it's stuck. House has no appetite for doing a big bill. So even if the Senate does pass it, the House isn't going to address it. Getting to a conference committee is going to be tough in an election year. We'll see if they can do it. But other than that, it's kind of going where we are there. Cybersecurity issues are everywhere in D.C. with all the different data breaches. Problem with cybersecurity, almost every single committee has jurisdiction on that bill. So if you get 5 committees trying to say it's ours, it's not going to go anywhere. So they've been trying to do this for years, but it's just that stalemate right now. After the Equifax and the Uber data breaches, if they couldn't get something moving by now because of those, it's going to be very tough for them to do any of that stuff. So they'll start doing this little one-off, seeing what they can do, but we'll see where we're at that point. But with that is what is or is not happening in D.C.
Seth, I got one question. Can you tell us about that newest ratepayer that you had come to your house?
Oh, yeah. Sophia Rose. She was 6 pounds, 3 ounces. She's 18.5 inches long. She is the apple of our eye, and she's just amazing. She's sleeping well. She's eating well. My wife is like Wonder Woman. She can do it all without me, which kind of scares me a little bit. But I make. I know. So now she lets me take my turns with her at times, but I don't have as many turns, that's for sure. But she's just great. I mean, she's.
Came early, and I said, welcome to parenthood. You have zero control going forward.
Yeah, she was.
It's over.
So that's right. So she was supposed to be born on December 26th and came on December 3rd. My wife it was funny too, because my wife just nonchalantly at 2 o'clock in the morning, she wakes me up. She's like, "Hey Seth, my water broke. We need to go to the hospital." I already called the hospital, and I'm like, "Okay." So we get up, and literally that Saturday, this was 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, we had packed our hospital bag. We'd bought the bassinet. We got everything done there because we were like, all right, we have a couple weeks. We're going to be fine. Then all of a sudden it hit, and now here we are, and we couldn't be happier. Mom's doing well. The baby's doing well. My mother-in-law's in town to help out, which is very helpful as well, and I appreciate everything that I got. I'm very blessed.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Okay. Yeah, solar tariff is still on there. It's at the trade office now. There's a lot of groups that are on both sides of that we really don't understand how it's working. Some are claiming that if there is a solar tariff on the overseas panels, it could tank the market because right now that's the way that keeps the prices low for solar panels or for solar installations now is because of those cheaper panels coming in. We put a tariff on it, those prices are going to go higher. It's going to even make it more difficult to do these things because the economics will be a little bit tougher. But on that as well, there's the solar ITC is also there's a provision in the House tax reform bill about the solar ITC, and they're tinkering with that to try to lower it and get rid of it faster than they would have before. We're supposed to have the 10% ITC for perpetuity. They're getting rid of that, I think, after 2026. Don't quote me on the date, but it's something like that. They're trying to get rid of that completely, which is also going to be difficult for that. The issue with the solar ITC is there isn't as big of a push to get rid of that as there is the wind PTC. Senator Grassley isn't as amenable to that as he is to the wind. So it's one of those things that's kind of up in the air and seeing where we're going to go, but it's with the tariff and the ITC changes in the House bill, which couldn't change to do whatever, since it's not in the Senate bill, it's a conferenceable item, you can do whatever you want in the conference. None of us are going to see it until the report comes out. It's kind of up in the air right now on where that's going to go.
Tariff does not require congressional action, correct?
Nope.
That's administrative?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks a lot.
That's our only item.
All right. The next is Systems Management Committee.
Yes, first of all, we have contract over 400,000, and we have Kate Brown. I believe she has talked to most of the directors about all the new changes that are coming around. So, Kate, this is one of the first big contracts that you're going to be talking about.
Thank you, Director Blair. This is contract $311,219 with Worldwide Technology. This is replacement of hardware, network components, and software to run our storage, both out of Energy Plaza and the ECC. So this is a basic hardware replacement for the environment.
There's no questions about that. Next, we have Mo Dogman talking about our locating services contract.
Sure. This is $1.9 million contract, and as you mentioned, it's for locating OPPD's underground facilities. This is the one call notification before we dig, 811, and then USIC was one of a few companies that we were able to negotiate with, and it's a really good story. We saved about 6% from what we typically pay, so it's all good.
And how long is this contract run for?
This is a 5-year contract. It will start January 1st of 2018. The first 3 years are fixed, 1.9, depending how many calls we get, because we pay per locate. And the last 2 years are negotiable. So it's a 5-year contract.
Okay, so it's 1.9 million each year for the next 5 years.
Yes, we're estimating we'll have about 160,000 locates. So if we have less, of course, we'll pay less than $1.9 million, because we pay about $11.25 per locate. But our estimate that we're going to be about $1.9 million, yeah.
Okay, good.
I presume we got an opt-out due to substandard performance.
Oh, of course, of course.
But if they
absolutely, absolutely, and that's why the process that we implemented. This is part of the cost initiative, where we have Javier's team and my team worked on bringing companies and negotiated the price and the performance, and we have indicators. So it's a really really good process. But yeah, to your point, we have things we have in place to make sure that they're performing up to our standards. So.
And this is a new company for us, is that correct?
USIC is one of about 3-4 companies that we've used prior to that.
Before.
So yeah,
Okay.
They're out of Cincinnati.
Okay.
They're certainly doing some of the locates now in the city as well. So
yeah.
I just made, this is a great example, and I'll let either Javier or Mo talk about how we've kind of structured our sourcing and our negotiations around this contract as an example of the work that we're doing. And I'll let one of you
Maybe I
kind of
can
talk
start,
through it.
and then Javier can jump in and add. What we've done differently, like 6 months before we needed to go through this contract, we informed Javier's team, and then we got the experts in one room, and we developed a strategy. What's really important to us, what kind of performance we want, what are the prices, and then we invited requests for proposals, requests for informations, and we had that information. And then we sat in a room and kind of went through every vendor. These are the expectations, this is the work, and we did that clean sheet that you've heard about it before. So it was very transparent what the cost is, what we allow for them to, increase their prices, and that negotiation, ended with really good results. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but.
So the end of the 5-year contract is lower than our current contract today. So 5 years out, our pricing in this contract is lower than our cost per day, and that's the savings that I think we're
Right.
continually looking at.
We will be saving about $140,000 a year, so by the end of 5 years, we'll have $700,000
Yeah.
of savings, yeah.
This is, the only thing I would add is, this is collaboration at its best. This is where you pair up the technical expertise of Mo's team with the technical expertise of my team on strategic sourcing and strategic negotiation, and you get a really good result. And we got a really good vendor, good relationship with the vendor, and it all worked well, leveraging the skills from all different parts of the company.
I'm amazed they can dispatch someone profitably for $11.
What was that?
That's just right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they get it done in 2 days, 2 business days, yeah.
Yes. So typically when they do a locate, it's electric, gas, water, cable. So there's, depending on, and many times we'll end up going together with a vendor to be able to do that. But it's and it's really about public safety, right? That's the intent here.
Absolutely,
and,
yeah.
And our commitment to that public safety and part of a requirement in the state of Nebraska as well. So
It is required. Okay, thanks.
We have, next is John Hanson is going to be talking about an addition to wind energy to our generation fleet.
Thank you, Director McGuire. And this is an action item to, again, talk about additional wind energy to our generation fleet. And we're basically asking for authorization to negotiate and award a PPA contract for wind generation. Recall that in late 2016, we developed an IRP, Integrated Resource Plan, that talked about wind being the most economic resource to add to our generation portfolio. And so as we go forward, we're looking at completing that recommendation. And so in conjunction with the IRP, again, we're looking for the most economic replacement energy. Recent stakeholder outreach also indicated support for this option in our portfolio by our OPPD stakeholders. And so we'll solicit responses for a competitive request for proposal and use those responses as a basis to begin the negotiation process. So we'll be going out for, the range will be 100 to 350 megawatts, and in the end, we'll be looking, originally, the IRP specified 426 megawatts, but recall that we did already generate or agree to a PPA for 160 with the Shoals. And so 266 remained, and then with our load growth, we added additional megawatts to bring it to about 329 megawatts is what we're looking for. And so we're kind of following what we did with Shoals, which proved to be a successful process for creating that and agreeing to a PPA, purchase power agreement. The only, we are asking for options of $1 per megawatt with battery storage as a possibility, and also shaping options, which essentially, when you over-generate, you'd pay a premium for somebody to bear the risk of over-generation. They would off-take that excess capacity and find a place for it in the market. Likewise, when you're under-generating, they would be accountable for that, to fill in that valley, if you will. So it creates more of a flattened curve rather than a volatile capacity.
Would this be the first time we use this in our contract?
If we do, that is correct. It's still it's going to be an option. It gives us some flexibility, perhaps. So we're looking at both those as options at this point.
They may or may not be economical, I think.
That's
you're
correct.
right. So
Yeah.
we want to take a look at them, be able to evaluate them and understand the impacts, and it could provide greater capacity value, depending if we get the right pricing and the shaping. And so we're going to take a look at it, see if the market's ready to do that. We've had preliminary conversations with folks around it, and we think now's the time to have that conversation, so.
Oh, sorry, Director Yoder. The only other part I just want to make you aware of was we will look at partnerships as well and see if that will give us a better price as well with public power partners, so.
Maybe get a larger farm with partnerships.
That's correct.
With additional utilities. 2%. I'm sorry?
About 2% of our 326 megawatts.
Yeah, so our total peak demand is in 3,200. 26, but we have total capacity of, or at least we did, of 32, so 20, yeah, so, yeah.
I'm excited about the battery and evaluating the battery.
Yeah.
So functionally, that's flattening the curve or responding when there's less generation has been done by the peaker plants system-wide. So this is an opportunity perhaps to replace some of that functionality, plus be able to capture the overgeneration, I think, which, how do you do that otherwise? Now, I mean, you hope somebody will buy it.
Goes into the market.
Yeah. The market drives your prices down.
Yeah, and so so the potential there is that we would get premium pricing for that overdemand if we can capture it in a battery and do it when we want to sell it in, rather than, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, so I think the question is who's willing to take that volatility? And there's a price and there's a benefit for that volatility, and we have certainly been taking that volatility both into positive and negative. But we're exploring what would it cost for us to put that volatility on someone else? What premium would we have to pay, and what are the benefits and costs that we would incur there?
So this is very exciting. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's on the shaping, but on the battery, it would give us that flexibility. So we're looking for different options to create that optionality for our customer owners.
Yeah, this is exciting and exactly the right thing to do. So congrats. Can we talk about what you and I were talking about earlier? Is that part of this RFP?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm excited to learn that the Nature Conservancy has a tool out there about low-risk wind locations in the state of Nebraska. And so this is to our environmental sensitivity. And I'm excited to hear that indeed that's in our RFP.
That's my understanding from Mr. Yeager, put that in the RFP. So we talked to our counterparts, Kansas City Power and Light referred this to us. They've utilized the same process in Missouri and some of their wind farms. And so this past spring we met with the Nebraska Nature Conservancy and understood kind of their concerns with siting and did incorporate those into the RFP. I'm going to turn to Jeff and acknowledge that.
Well, no, that's good, and maybe you want to talk up here so everybody can hear. But while you come over, I guess it's useful, I think, when there's this increased effort to create tension about siting at the unicameral to know that we're doing this. So yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Director Yeager, I'm very brief because in the RFP, we just state in there that we give preference to those sites that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife have kind of a similar siting protocol as well as the Nature Conservancy, but we give both preference to both those if developers give those. So
yeah, that's terrific. Didn't know about it, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Do we give do we give any preferences for farms that are located in Nebraska? Is that something that we say is a priority for us as well?
I don't think we say it.
Okay.
We look favorably upon that, but I don't think we let it. We're looking for the best offering for our customers overall.
Okay.
In the RFP.
Okay.
But I will tell you, all of our PPA wind farms are in the state of Nebraska today.
Yeah.
So.
As an indicator.
As an indicator.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Sorry, timing. Curious on timing.
I'm trying to recall. I've got them in my notes here.
I think our intent would be we would begin the RFP process, come back to the board as early as next month, but more likely in the February timeframe.
First quarter.
And so, yeah.
First quarter. First quarter, you're looking to have an agreement signed?
First quarter, I think we're making the determination as to what the project would be.
Got it.
It takes a little bit to negotiate.
Yeah, sure.
Could be early second quarter. I don't want to confine us.
Let's say first half of the year.
Sometimes these
Yes.
take a little longer than you expect, but.
By 19 or?
That I don't know. I think that'd be speculative at this point because, you know, I'll use Shoals as the example. It was going to be end of 2019, and then they've been flexible in what the actual date will be. So I would wait till we get somewhat into the negotiations before we put that out there.
Support Facebook. And these typically, the potential bidders have projects that are in kind of different stages of development, right? And I don't know the breadth of what that looks like, but I'm just kind of curious as to where we're drawing that line in the sand where we say you have to be at this line or further in that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you in reference to the PTCs?
No, it's more about their due diligence, I think, to ensure that they've got siting nailed down. They're further through the process so that we have more confidence that they've got everything done. They've dotted their I's or crossed their T's.
That'll be part of the PPA evaluation.
Okay.
And the contract.
Yeah, and I would say, Director Moody, that anytime they don't have those things locked down, it adds more risk to OPPD. So, you know, we're doing our best to minimize the risk when we're negotiating those contracts. So the folks who have, obviously the folks who have the most of those things locked down are the most.
Mitigates risk for us.
Right.
Sure. Okay.
Good question.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great way to go out, John.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, if that concludes systems management.
Okay, so we have governance committee coming up. Do we just have that meeting calendar? And then the rest is exec? So what I'm thinking, do we want to get?
No, we have presentations of innovation and IEM.
Yeah, we
as
did
well.
presentations.
We'll go right to there, then back to exec. What I'm saying is, you want to take a 10-minute break? Just take a 10-minute break.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Yeah, okay, and it's about 10 now, so 10:10 we'll come back.
Yeah, I know.
I just can't whistle like I used to.
All right. Ready to get started again?
Okay.
Maybe some flexibility.
Turn it over to Director Mines, Governance Committee.
We have two items from governance. I think last meeting we reviewed the calendar for 2018, and we will be voting on that. Or actually, is this a reporting item?
It's just reporting.
It's a reporting item. And just before that happens, if there are any further questions, we wanted to address that. I see no questions. The other issue.
Excuse me?
There's absolutely nothing we add to that.
No.
I did have a question. Yeah, so the question I had is that we get a 101 on rate making the same month that we are looking at the SD on rates. Might that be better off a month ahead?
Well, it could be. You're going to get 4 of them over the year. So
the first one is the same month as we talk about the SD.
One of the 4.
Yeah. I'm just suggesting that maybe it's wrong to think.
Hold on.
Which month?
So we've got OPPD rates in February, and SD2 doesn't get covered until May.
Oh, well then.
SD2 is rates.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we do have a heads up. All right, well, good,
Yeah.
thanks.
We've got multiple OPPD rates 101 courses.
Yeah, there's 4 just to break them out. I
It'll
think.
take that long to get me
You need
halfway up to
multiple.
speed, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Well, the intent is to kind of break it out into
Yeah.
residential, kind of multiple commercial, and then kind of industrial.
How
and
many
then
pages is the
specialty.
rates? There's lots of pages. I mean, the total number
Oh,
of
yeah.
pages. I mean, my
we're
book
not-
used to be this big.
Yeah, we're not going to step through every single one of those. We're going to really get to kind of methodology, rationale around it, and
Yes.
those kind of educational pieces. So just
All right.
as a general primer for everybody.
I think Kim did a nice job laying that thing out.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
for
I
sure.
thought it was
Over
great,
a whole
Kim. It's
year.
better than it's ever
And
been.
then,
Yes.
Yeah, so all those, of course, any time in between there, I mean, if you see what's coming up in
You
2
can
months,
change.
and that's your primary interest, obviously, you can talk to anybody at any time, so
This
don't
is
wait, don't think you
yeah.
have to wait till that month if.
Yeah, but deadlines do spur action
Yeah,
for
oh,
some
yeah,
of us.
absolutely,
Then I know we have talked kind of offline about a FERC update. Is that the same thing as the NERC?
Mo, do you wanna, is Mo here?
It's not here.
January.
Disappeared.
Where did it go?
No.
There he is.
Hey, bravo.
We have that as a TBD in senior management to put on the agenda at some point, so.
Okay, so it didn't land, but
It
it's
didn't
still
land yet.
in the
This-
ether waiting to land.
Yep, this is
All
a
right.
very flexible document,
Yes,
so,
very,
which is why you don't vote on it, because otherwise we'd be voting every month.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that it was still out there.
Just to give you an update. I always like to look at the month ahead because I know that's probably more set in stone.
Yeah, and it's why I give you guys the 3-month outlook too.
Which is very
so,
much appreciated,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, that's something to come.
Okay.
Well, I got a question then too. So when you do that, I mean, they're preparing presentations and all sorts of things, so that's good for senior management too. So we don't move it that much. I mean, it's fairly flexible.
Yeah.
It has some flexibility, but we do like to stick to that agenda, right? Because
like to try to, yes.
for their reporting purposes and things we have to do, like audits and, you know, financial things too. Sometimes I think they're fit into this schedule, right?
Yes.
So just clarifying that. It's not like you move it around too much.
Appreciate it, thank you.
I had a couple of questions, if that's okay. When I think we were reviewing SD 5 and maybe 13, we talked about some regular kind of quarterly customer trends updates. And are we looking at those coming through the director's update rather than
Yes.
board
I
meeting?
think that's what the intention was.
Okay, and then I saw that the second wave of IEM stuff is not until June.
So every 6 months, you're gonna get some kind of update if there's something to update you on, or the initiatives.
So you're going to get kind of 3 items today. Probably in the February, March timeframe, we'll be in a position to come with the second 4.
Okay.
And so we're currently reviewing with the senior team, kind of that next 4, kind of the game plans. Teams are working on those. We'll bring those back in the February, March timeframe or something close to that.
answers that question.
Any other questions?
Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
The next item is Resolution 6222, and I move we remove this from the agenda. There's some wordsmithing that I'm having trouble with. Exemplary. Another one they mention is,
Oh, wait a minute.
So it's not enough of a superlative? Is that your?
We need a little bit more, is that it?
unprecedented leader. I've got an issue with that as well. No, frankly, the resolution is before you. If you have things you want to add or change. John, you want to change anything? Would you like me to leave the room?
They're still just.
No, I think you can stay here.
No, we'd like to do this in public, actually.
Is this a roast?
So, seeing any questions? I see none, we're done.
Okay, and then we'll have an exec to talk about that corporate comp.
Right.
So, okay, with that, we've got some presentations to go to. I'll turn this over to Scott. You want to walk us through kind of, should I just direct it to you about innovation update, integrated energy and community solar?
Community solar plan, but really talking about the 2 initiatives. So I have the pleasure really of working with 7 strategic initiatives and the SI program managers for each of those initiatives. Our intention over the past few months is to give you as a board kind of an overview of what these initiatives are, the significant milestones, the calendars, and where we're working on them. So far you've seen the updates on customer experience and financial sustainability, the cost and process, best places to work, and accountable management system. From a strategic perspective, we're really doing a lot of very significant things to ensure that we're not only ready to continue to deliver excellence today, but really making sure that we remain incredibly relevant for tomorrow. So I'm very excited with this future focus to be looking at both the innovation and the integrated energy marketplace initiatives today. For each of these initiatives, in addition to a program manager who you'll come to know better in just a minute or so, each one of them has a champion, a senior manager who helps make sure that we're steering the vision of the initiative with the overall vision of the organization and making sure that that aligns, it gets the right priority, right efforts around it. And with that, I will turn it over to Kate Brown, who has been the champion for this, so that she can introduce Matt and provide a little context about this overall initiative. Kate?
Scott. So I've been the executive sponsor for the innovation initiative, and someone coming from the technology side, it was wonderful to be provided the opportunity to take innovation and to work with the people that have been involved in this. I consider this an incredibly successful initiative. A lot of initiatives in my past life in organizations don't make it to the operational side of the house or become operationalized, become part of the DNA and the broader fabric of the organization. This clearly has, and it's because of the people that have worked on this. So I will introduce Matt Hardebeck. There he is.
And I might, just really quick, and you're going to hear me talk about how these things relate. So the strategic directives is really the board direction for management to begin to drive the organization. And so these initiatives are really our response from a management side on the things that we believe we need to do to meet those strategic direction elements. And so that's what's driving us internally about how we're thinking about the future. So you're going to hear me say that every time we talk about a strategic initiative, because it really is based on the strategic directives and our response to those.
Very good. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Now, in light of innovation, this is going to feel maybe a little different than maybe what you've seen in the past, but it'll still provide the same clarity as you've seen before. So I'll give you a second to read this real quickly. It's kind of an eye test. So kind of funny in some way, but kind of true, right? A lot of organizations struggle with how do you leverage innovation? How do you understand it, right? How do you make sure it's doing what it needs to do? Either shy away from it in some way, or maybe believe, like this Blockbuster quote, maybe transformation is not really happening in your space, right? We're all pretty familiar with the trends and the opportunities that are available to us in the industry that are going on today. But if you think about leveraging innovation, it can be a real powerful component. And not thinking of it just as an initiative, but thinking about it more broadly in terms of it being a part of your DNA. If you just look at things a little differently, it can be a very, very powerful tool. So moving on, we think of innovation as really a spectrum at OPPD. It's from your process improvement side all the way to your transformational side. So on the process improvement side, it could be as small as replacing a part in a pad-mounted transformer. And by replacing that part, you have a safety component that's increased, you have a reliability component that's increased, you have new value that you're bringing to your customer, and you also maybe would get a cost savings. Maybe the other end of the spectrum, the transformational part, might look like a way that's economical and safe to transmit energy to our customers without using poles and wires. I think about what that would do to the industry if you could develop something like that that's cost effective and efficient and safe. It could have quite the impact, right? And as you think a little bit more about the power of innovation and what that can actually do, is really drawn towards two strategic directives. Strategic directive number 2, competitive rates, and SD number 5, customer satisfaction. Leveraging innovation can have a powerful impact on those two. I think it's important to back up a little bit and talk about where innovation has been at OPPD and where it is today before I move on to where it's going. So innovation started kind of roughly formally about 2 years ago. And that was the ability to give employees an avenue to submit their ideas, to go around those clay layers that we generally have in organizations. An ability for a team to look at a concept and work through that quickly. Over the past 2 years, we've matured in our thoughts and our approach and our skills. We've accepted new tools that help us de-risk these innovation ideas. The ability to quickly learn something at a very small scale and then explore that further to understand its implementation. This moved from a small team into an initiative. The maturity growth that we had was great. The initiative is really driven to be able to allow our employees to think creatively about solutions and opportunities, explore those, and implement those all in the direction of trying to provide new value to our customers. It's so critical to innovation. So as you think about innovation, you really think about it in kind of three main components. One, you have your strategy. Innovation's got to be tied to the overall corporate strategy, and there has to be a window or a direction that innovation needs to hit. That's all part of the strategy look for innovation. The next piece is the governance side, the management. How do you govern it? How do you put a flexible but yet accountable structure around it to ensure that it's really hitting the strategy that it needs to hit? And then next, moving on to the practice side. What's the structure that you're going to put in place to make sure innovation is really going to hit those things? What are the things that we need to be doing ultimately to hit the right-hand side of the screen? The customers. Ultimately, we have to drive the value for the customers. It's so critically important. So here's the roadmap. Here's where we're going. 2017 was really framed up, and we got a great learning out of it. In the first quarter of 2017, we really started understanding and framing up the work. That drove us to conversations with other utilities from around the country, other corporations from around town, and also nationally. Moving on to the second quarter was really the start of the strategy work. It's understanding where innovation needs to go. The third quarter of 2017 was really understanding some of the practice and some of the governance. And then the fourth quarter, as we're in today, we're coming back to the strategy again to solidify it and cement it into its place. So really that's where we are today, is looking at the strategy. What are the things that we believe are going to happen in the future, and how do we leverage innovation to make these things come to life? Management. That'll be the next thing. How do we put a structure around it? What's the governance actually look like? How do we make it accountable but flexible? Innovation needs the flexibility to bend out and bend in. The engine side of it. What's the structure that we need? How do we make this systematic in some way? How do we incorporate it into OPPD, yet still provide that flexibility that it needs? Transitioning from an initiative into operations. You heard Kate talk about this a little bit, and this is a big maturity jump for us. So it's not just an initiative, it just becomes the way we do things. It's incorporated so much into our DNA. That'll happen sometime in the spring of 2018. And lastly, review. As things change quickly in our environment, you need to come back and understand the strategic view that you had when you set this all up is still the same thing. You're still pointing your innovation engine in the right direction. So on a yearly basis, we'll come back, understand where our innovation engine is really placed and where it's heading. So I'm sure this probably leads to the question of, what does success actually look like, right? I mean, innovation's kind of a tough thing to define, right? So what does success actually look like? And I would say setting up the strategy, the governance, and the practice is some success. But the ultimate success is placing that new value in the hands of our customers. It's got to do that. It's so critically important. moving on to what are the next steps. So we're going to step away, Scott, Kate, and I will step away and start working on and finalizing the strategy, as well as the governance behind it. And with that, I'll take questions.
You can go back a couple slides.
Yeah.
Right there, innovation portfolio.
Yep.
What is in your innovation portfolio right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is all forward-looking. So a portfolio, if you think about it on the investment side, you make little bets across a wide spectrum. As you go back to that, what is innovation? It's a spectrum, right? From transformative all the way to CPI, or the continuous process improvement. You make bets along that spectrum. And that's what the portfolio is really supposed to do.
So I would say, and I think our focus has been, over the last 2 years, is really been, you know, as we've identified that spectrum to really be kind of three different kind of elements, right? The first element, kind of that first phase, is that cost and process improvement
Right.
right piece. And so we've been focused on that through our cost and process improvement, even through our innovation bursts and the work that we're doing across the organization, kind of stimulating idea generation, how to improve, whether it's quality, quantity, whether it's performance, those kinds of pieces. We're really going to keep that on the continuous process improvement side, and with Joe Wazak retiring at the end of the year, that'll be reporting directly into Scott for that related work. Innovation will report directly to Scott as well, because we're going to really focus on how can we reimagine our work differently, and then this transformational piece. Now, we're not talking about being R&D.
Very grassroots, though.
Very grassroots, but I would also say it's just not grassroots. It's about getting outside kind of influence in on that, whether it's a customer reverse pitch, whether it's a venture capital reverse pitch on what may work for us. That's the big pieces that we may evaluate. Again, we're not an R&D shop necessarily, right? But we may partner with other folks that are doing those kinds of things to be first users, integrators, whatever that may look like in the transformational space. I don't want to answer your question here, but
that's good. It has to be anchored in the continuous process improvement. That's where it has to be anchored. But you're just making bets on or putting investments out along that whole spectrum. So
I was just going to add, we have not had a formal portfolio at this point. This is forward-looking. What they've been doing is taking ideas that have been generated and testing them out, seeing how that works, so we learn that aspect of it. So when we have a portfolio, we've kind of built some muscle there as to how to manage and build the portfolio across the diverse aspects of all the different ideas that come in.
What you see in some best practice organizations that do establish a portfolio is that this initial immediate horizon of continuous improvement, you see like 80–85% of the effort being focused there, and then some area of effort really pushing beyond the boundaries of your organization today. So for example, carving out time potentially for exploring the opportunities of virtual reality in terms of safety training, or how do we pull that together and leverage that kind of technology in a way that could look different than how we actually manage those operations today. They feel so separate, and they could be disruptive to how we look at those kinds of things today. So you want to be very mindful and careful, carving out the time, the space, the energy to pull it away from your core operations as you're exploring it and seeing what could happen, what could be. So.
I would not expect that portfolio to be very big right now, considering we're just in the infancy, but I thought we should talk about it a little bit.
Right. Yeah, very good
great.
question. Okay.
To me, one of the things that I am challenged by is my inability to think outside the box. And so I'm kind of curious, you know, as you're soliciting ideas and building that portfolio, is everything on the table? Like, is this just bring every idea that we've got, regardless of its implication on the organization and what we do, from, you know, human capital to
Right.
T&D? I mean, is this just
Yeah.
let's bring everything forward and see what we've got?
Yes, so let me answer that in two ways. So first, the last 2 years was bring that to the table. Going forward, it'll really be built around this this thesis and portfolio approach, right? Because that really drives the strategy. Where do you want innovation to go? So that in some way acts as a filter on all concepts.
Sure.
And then you would leverage this de-risking approach. It's called lean startup, if anybody's familiar with that concept. It's a way to quickly test these disruptive or even transformational type ideas with making very, very small investments and learning quickly through them. So that you can come back to a decision maker with a lot of information. Before you would plan, decision, it's plan a little bit, execute, learn, plan, execute, learn. Sure. Yeah. So taking those kind of methods and using it with this strategy.
Okay, so that's helpful from a process standpoint, but Mike, I'm still wondering about the scope of what we're considering here. Is it everything? Getting that.
So it could be anything. To your point, it could be very disruptive to the organization.
Sure.
We would look at it and bring it through the process to understand, is this something we should pick up? So it is.
Okay.
It's pretty wide open as
Okay.
long as it ties ultimately to the thesis.
Right.
Yeah. Because
And-
you try not to put, filters on things before you understand what the idea is.
We're not going to be a auto manufacturer.
Right.
Right? So we're not going to, that would kick out of our
That would not-
innovation thesis. And as we fully kind of vet that out internally, we'll come back and share the details of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a better idea on what that is.
Yeah. One of the most important, one of the things that I was struck by, I think I'm going to paraphrase something you said.
Okay.
We're asking what are the things we believe are going to happen in the future and what are the things we need to do to succeed in that future.
Mm-hmm.
So like that future thinking is really an interesting proposition to me because this industry to me seems to be at a point of quick transition.
Yeah.
And so envisioning what this industry needs to be and do and as the industry changes, it begs us to really continue to ask the question, what is our role in that new reality?
Right.
Is a really important thought exercise. So I was just really struck by kind of the need to really think about the future and think about how do we transition so that new future is something that we can succeed in.
Yeah.
With flat, if not decreasing load, like all of those things are disruptive technology all over the place. Right. It's really good that we're thinking in those terms.
Yeah.
Otherwise we get caught off guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole reason for innovation, right? It builds up the mindset across the organization too, to be able to learn these tools and apply them in there. But also someone's looking out in front, right? In some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how is this interfacing with, and you kind of referred to this earlier, how is this interfacing with the IEM work that we're doing, with best places to work? I mean, I would imagine there's overlap all over the place, right?
So I can speak to that. It's managed like a portfolio of initiatives, if you will, across. So these are all programs, and we manage them collectively from a management perspective on a monthly basis. We're providing updates, we're having conversations, we're making sure that the swim lanes are relatively clear, we're identifying opportunities for collaboration. There have been some that have been actually, I think, thoughtful and meaningful. As you can imagine, something like innovation, connecting with customer experience, connecting with IEM, there's opportunities, and at the very least, it's shaping the thinking, I think, as the initiatives are unfolding, and there have been opportunities for real discussion as well. So it's been good, and that's how it's being managed, as a portfolio of initiatives.
Thank you.
I think in conversations that we've had, either one-on-one or collectively in the past year, many times I'm told that we're doing so much better than we used to, and that's backward looking. So I think it's important to look forward, and I very much appreciate that that's what's happening. The thing that I will do at this point, just limit my comment and the question, is, claim my birthright of having been born in Missouri. I look forward to the fact that you're going to show me the strategy in the first part of next year, right? Okay, do we get a report? Is that on the calendar? Or is it 6 months out?
6 months.
This one's 4. months out, but it might be due to the fact that, and Scott gave me those months, so I'm looking at him. But it might be due to the fact that this is moving under Scott and something will be occurring a little quicker.
And really, to your point, I think that also being from the kind of show me mentality, I think we will have something more tangible. My hope would be that we would have tangible things to show you as a direct outcome of this strategy put into place. So the timing is right. I think we're seeing the same timing on the calendar.
Any other questions? We'll see. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would just share with you in our innovation board that we have internally. So we've brought in kind of an entrepreneur from the outside to be part of that. That's with the startup collaborative work that's going on in Omaha here. We did have David Arnold that originally was part of that, and when David went to do his work elsewhere, we brought in someone from the Omaha Chamber and the Startup Collaborative that's doing just to give us that perspective and to challenge our thinking. And we're going to continually look at that and maybe even bring in others to help support what that work may look like. So it really is that inward challenge with that outward focus, very clearly. So I will tell you. How's that sound? We'll let you all know. So. It's Elon Musk. No, it's not Elon Musk. No.
All right. So, Troy.
I got him. You go ahead and set it up.
Well, we've been talking for some time about the integrated marketplace. The team has been working on a number of initiatives, as you'll see, and today what they're going to be providing you is an update on the first group. And we have the number of people that are coming in here today is actually still just a very small portion of the number of people across the organization who have been working on this. This has been a full court effort. Full court, is that right? Yeah, full, yeah. It's been a big effort. Like, everybody is working on it. So, in this particular initiative, given its breadth, its depth, and overall impact to the organization, Tim has been directly assigned to this as the champion. And is there anything that you would like to say in terms of team?
I would say this. I mean, I think there was a conversation is that what does the innovation presentation that we have tie into IEM? And I think I would say what we're looking at from the IEM and what Troy will share is what it is and what it isn't. Right, but there are certain things that we need to do today to prepare for that future. But the innovation will really kind of begin to take that and kind of uplift that in a way that has us really think 5, 10, 15 years out in what that may look like. So you'll see these things tying together, and I think as we mature around these items that you're going to hear 3 today and 4 in a couple months here, it's really yet future focused, but it's things that we're going to be doing today to prepare us for that. So I'll just leave it at that. Again, really a corporate effort, a variety of folks that are working on this, as well as their current jobs over the course of the last 6 months or so, and you're going to see some of the output that we're focused on and the things that we're doing. And I'm really pleased that the whole team is here to kind of see that. And I would ask the board to challenge us on the things that we're going to be talking about. So with that, we'll have Troy come up and start us off.
All right. Good morning. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Troy Vai, and I'm the Director of Energy Marketing and Trading here at OPPD and also Program Manager for this particular initiative. I'll share with you I'm a little under the weather today, so if I pause, know that that's why I'm pausing. So I've been fighting a stomach bug over the weekend. With that being said, we'll give you an update of where we're at now and some of the things that we're focusing on going forward. This first slide that we have is provided to give you kind of an overview of the scope of IEM. We have, as was mentioned, 39 individuals from across the organization from different backgrounds, different tenure with the company involved in this initiative, and that helps us to think from a diverse standpoint, and it's been very good for us. We are trying to take a holistic view of kind of looking at our business model today and what that business model might look like in the future, considering all the changes that are going on in the marketplace, and really trying to think about both traditional ways of doing business and some non-traditional ways of doing business, and looking at that from a customer value proposition standpoint. The box down below are our strategic directives that have been given to us by the board, and we find those extremely helpful as we walk through this process. Excuse me. Because they provide us kind of a North Star or a lens to look through as we're making decisions and analyzing information. What I find most interesting about those is if you think about the way they're set up, they're really indicative of public power. And so our focus is really on providing the most economical product to our customers and doing it in a manner that's reliable and provides good customer satisfaction. Now this next slide we put together to kind of make sure that we're clear on what IEM is and is not. And so IEM is an initiative that's really focusing on this changing environment and trying to understand that environment both in a short-term and long-term perspective. As Tim had mentioned, the short-term processes or development that will be put in place is really about things that are in our purview. What do we see now? What makes sense at this point in time? Longer term are things that maybe take a while to ramp up, or there may be technologies that today don't make sense, but in the near future probably will. And so as we walk through this process, we need to look at it in that standpoint. I'd mentioned new technologies, and understanding those technologies are very important also. So what are the value drivers? How can they be utilized in our system? How have other people utilized them from a successful and non-successful standpoint? Those lessons learned are very important. And then are there any third-party partnership opportunities that we can take advantage of as we move through this? What IEM is not is we're not looking for ways to rebalance our generation portfolio. We have an integrated resource plan that studies that each year and provides in-depth. With that being said, as we look at technologies, some of our findings will feed into that process and may change the way that we look at those technologies in the future. We are not looking to change the organizational structure of OPPD. With that being said, as we walk through this, there are clearly opportunities for improvement of ownership of certain things. Electric vehicles come to mind, having a single ownership within the organization, kind of that go-to person, which has not been defined yet at this date. And we're also not looking to design a smart grid. We have a pilot program here at OPPD that is looking at smart grid and understanding it and collecting data and gaining experience. And once that's done, the organization will look at a business case around that technology. This is one of the first slides that we developed as a team when we started working on this, and it was really to kind of understand the new entrants, the new competition into the marketplace, where traditionally utilities and other energy providers were your competitors. It's interesting now to see that landscape change. If you look, most of these companies are technology-based companies or somewhat early startup. So there's a lot of focus on the energy industry, and we need to understand where they're spending their dollars, what kind of research that they're doing, what kind of products are they focused on in the future, to think about how that may impact us and how we may be able to leverage those going forward. As we've walked through this environment to try to understand where things are going, we kind of listed some key considerations, and these help us to define later which paths we really want to spend time and resources focusing on. And so one of the top reasons customers seek new energy alternatives, and not just energy but other alternatives, is when their provider has a high cost, when their customer satisfaction is not very good, so the interface between the customer and the entity is not in good standing, or if there's poor reliability. And if you think about it, once they start down this path, and one of the first discussion points is always, what is economics? Does it make economical sense for me to adopt this new technology? I know it's been mentioned before, but our group also wanted to take a look at load and how load is shaping up in the future, and we kind of did this separate from our normal internal process just to see where we ended up, and came out to basically the same answer: is load is expected to be flat in the OPPD territory through 2028 pretty readily, and that's without the new addition of large economic development activities like some of the data center work that's been done recently. So that's very interesting if you think about it. If you live in Omaha, you see the new subdivisions going up on the peripherals, you see the new school systems and businesses. And the point here is that customer-initiated energy efficiency at the home is more than offsetting most of this normal growth that we see within our organization. So if you think about LEDs, replacing light bulbs with LEDs, if you think about new appliances that you buy today and how much more efficient they are than the ones in the past, that more than offsets the additional growth that we're seeing within our footprint. A technology that we're seeing that's of high interest to us is electric vehicles, because it does help with that. It adds load to your service territory. Unfortunately, in Nebraska, at least at this time, and many other states, adoption of this technology is still pretty low. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the upfront cost of it is a little higher than that of traditional gas-fired vehicles. However, the cost of those are coming down pretty readily, and which makes the cost more in line with what traditional vehicles would be. There's some anxiety around the range, and so if you think about it, within the last few years, there's been quite a step up in the range capability of these new vehicles. Traditionally, it's been less than 100 miles on a charge. Now we're seeing some of the new models like Tesla and the Leaf have nearly 200 plus miles between charges, which is pretty substantial if you think about how far that's come in a short period of time. We'd expect that to continue over the next few years. And then there's the limited charging infrastructure in place. So, you know, if we're driving around in our gas-fired vehicles, obviously there's gas stations on just about every corner, so we don't have to really plan readily when we're taking trips. Electric vehicles at this stage are a little different, where that infrastructure is in development, and there's a lot of activity across Nebraska as well as some other states to try to get that infrastructure in place. If you look at any integrated resource plan of a utility in the last few years, they've all focused on a couple of things. One is renewables, and then what do they need to do or have in place, what kind of resources to manage the variable output of those renewables. And so what you see them focusing on are fast reacting resources like a combustion turbine, or now what you're starting to see show up in a lot of these integrated resource plans is a view of batteries and how batteries can be used in the future, because they also react very quickly. With that being said, grid scale storage costs are expected to be competitive with a natural gas combustion turbine in the next 5 to 10 years, and may overtake that. What's interesting is the cost curve on those is coming down pretty sharp, where the traditional combustion turbine is pretty level. And so if you think about our large wind portfolio here at OPPD, this is a really exciting technology for us to understand and keep our eyes on as we move forward. And then there's some opportunities we think exist to expand our products and services beyond our current service territory. There's a lot of little small towns, municipals in the state of Nebraska and other states as far as that's concerned that don't have the economies of scale that we have, or the expertise in some areas, and we feel like that could be an opportunity for us going forward. As we reflect on some of these, it's interesting to see how OPPD is changed over the last few years to help move us into a very positive position. We've got good customer satisfaction, we have pretty good overall reliability, but I think the main point here is our focus on cost competitiveness and how we're trying to take costs out of our business, and how that provides opportunities for us as we move forward to make good strategic decisions. All right, as we walk through those considerations, we had to figure out how do we focus the resources here at OPPD to make sure that we're chasing after the right things. And so this is a list of the 9 initiatives that were identified by IEM. And the top 4 here that are in green, it says completed. That means that the work, the study, the analysis around those have been completed, and we're starting to actually integrate some of that into the organization. We're going to spend some time here in a few minutes having a much deeper dive into those, so you can definitely ask some questions as we walk through that. The blue section are kind of the technology initiatives that we're chasing down, and those are kind of the shiny balls in the room because they are new, and everybody gets excited when you start talking about new technology. We expect most of the work on that to be done by the end of Q1 of next year. And then in the boxes below the red section are 2 outstanding initiatives that are not being driven by IEM. They were identified as a need, but they are outside our view. And so the first one is general rate design, and to look at those rate designs, thinking about the technology that's coming in the future and making sure we're ready for that new technology as it becomes available. Tammy Monroe and the rates group are focused on that. There's a few folks from IEM and a few folks from other areas of the organization that's currently involved with that. And that work's ongoing. I know they've been focusing a lot on community solar, started to look at distributed generation. So I'm sure you'll get some updates on that in the future. And then the last one's the integrated planning process. And that is a process that will be held at the senior team level, headed by Scott. And so the purpose of that is to make sure that as an organization, we are really looking at things from a cross-functional standpoint. So, you know, our distribution and transmission planning is working really well with our resource planning groups. And the work that's coming out of IEM, how does it continue to be integrated? How does this activity continue to take place over time because technologies change? So we have this initiative that's been put together to kind of look at this, you know, kind of at a mass scale right now, but you have to continue that in the future, and that initiative will help define what that will look like moving forward. All right, with that being said, what I'm going to have is the initiative leads for each one of those first 4 that I showed you that were in green come up and speak to their initiative. The first one of those is Brad Underwood, and he'll talk to you about energy efficiency and demand response. Demand response, and how it was looked at under the purview of transmission, distribution, and generation deferral opportunities.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be with you today. I'm pleased to convey some of the results that the DREE team had and the work that we've done, and look forward to showing that to you. So as many of you are aware, total system load is relatively flat. And there are events that happen that cause that to grow, like economic development and those sorts of things. But within the larger system, there are pockets of the system that have growth. And so what we were trying to do is consider the values of transmission, distribution, and generation within these pockets of our service territory that are experiencing load growth. And the idea was, is there something we can do from a demand response and an energy efficiency perspective to try and avoid the infrastructure build out, specifically at the sub, but also, you know, at small transmission levels as well. And so you can see on the left side here what we tried to do. The first thing that we did was we went externally and we pulled in a number of case studies for other utilities that have done this in other places of the country. So Brooklyn, Queens kind of comes to mind. These kinds of concentrated EEDR deployments where they've had really expensive system cost upgrades that they were trying to avoid, and we tried to aggregate what the learnings were from those case studies. And from there, we progressed to our 5-year T&D system plan. So we look out over 5 years and we say, hey, based on load growth, based on location, based on whatever these factors are, we feel like there's going to be a need for incremental infrastructure in these locations of the system. And we tried to identify, are there certain projects that make more sense for us to focus EE and DR on than other projects. And so we created a process to identify kind of what I would characterize as kind of high potential candidates that we could potentially defer with the deployment of EE and DR. And then we developed a process to incorporate the deferral analysis for future projects. So a lot of what we found is there were individuals within these areas of the organization that had kind of tribal knowledge, and they kind of knew, you know, in certain situations we would look to do certain things, but we really kind of hardened the process of how are we going to look at projects, how are we going to look at our EEDR programs, and then how are we going to try and marry those in a way where we can avoid some potential significant system upgrades. And right out of the gate, we learned that we need to script that process. We need to harden that process and make sure that those that come behind us who weren't a part of the initiative know what to do, they know how to do it in order to ensure sustainability of the effort. And when we went down, we also identified that there are some very critical kind of project characteristics or project attributes that make EEDR solutioning either make a lot of sense or don't make sense at all. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So if you have an area of the system that has really significant load growth, I mean, it's growing double digits, it's a residential build, maybe there's some small commercial in there, and it's just growing so fast that you can't throw enough EE and DR at it to stop it. And that's just going to happen. And so that was part of the process that we thought through. In addition, in that 5-year plan with over 100 projects, there's also things like rebuilds. So we just need to rebuild failing infrastructure. There's no way that we can, potentially shave the load. This is either an interconnection issue or whatever. We just can't use EEDR more thoughtfully to try and avoid that. And the last thing that we learned is most of the successful cases really used a combination. And what I mean by that is it took a lot of kind of intentional effort and calibration to say, I need this much EE, I need this much DR. Do I need an incremental technology on top of that goes beyond EE and DR to make that successful? And we saw that in a number of instances in our case studies. So going to our next step, the recommendations that we were making to the senior team is number one there is let's turn it on. Let's turn the process on. Let's make sure that we're doing this process. Let's make sure that it's sustainable. The ease of implementation was relatively low based on the body of work that the group had done. It was kind of a handoff. Here's your tool, now you can go and use it. And we were very thoughtful too to get stakeholder input during development. So we had those individuals in the room giving us feedback. Yeah, it won't work. No, it won't work. Why? We kind of had those challenge sessions to make sure that when we came out on the back end, there wouldn't be any surprises from anybody. And so we worked really hard at that. The second one you can see there is we did not find any candidates that it made economic sense to concentrate EE and DR programs in certain areas of the system to avoid the infrastructure build. Kind of the candid way to say that is all of the projects were NPV negative versus our traditional solution of building out the T&D infrastructure. But we didn't think, we realized that the effort was not a failure. In other words, there may be a project coming down in a couple years that we haven't identified where this makes a lot of sense. And that's the value of making sure that your program is sustainable, is we'll be able to catch what's coming behind us, equipping those individuals behind us with kind of the knowledge that they need to use the processes. And then and we want to make sure that we do that annually. And then the third item here is kind of going into the mid to end of 2018 there, Q2 or Q4. There were a couple things that we came along that were just outside of the scope of EEDR. So there were kind of things on the system where we just said, hey, we think this deserves a harder look, but right now it doesn't fall within the scope and schedule of the EEDR team. So we're going to kind of put that in a parking lot, and then we're going to have some folks go in after us and take a look at that. And that task force is going to look at potentially additional technology options to see if they can kind of solution some of those really unique sort of infrastructure problems a little bit more thoughtfully. And then the last one, item 4, even though we did a lot of external case analysis, we brought in stakeholders, we tried to solicit as much third-party feedback and information as we could. We just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. So the 4th step there is, hey, we're gonna request a reverse RFP with some of our kind of high potential system upgrades, and we're gonna ask somebody, how would you guys do this, to make sure that we didn't miss anything in our analysis, and to make sure that we get a good quality product to go forward. And if we have findings from that, we would of course embed that into our process. One thing that I think is probably noteworthy is, many of you are familiar with the suite of EE and DR programs that we have right now. Those are going to continue. Those are going to go on their current trajectory. I know we've recently added Nest. The customer group led that, and we've got a lot of those load shifting efficiency programs. So those are going to continue. We're not making any recommendation related to those. We're just saying at this time, there's really no way to deploy those solutions in a way that we could avoid system upgrades. So with that, I'd love to answer some questions, Director Mons.
Yeah, Brad, thank you. This is a high level, I understand, but how do you screen and provide cost benefits when a big company like a Facebook just lands? Yeah. I know there's a long work up to a project like that, but sometimes they just happen. Do you use best practices? How do you screen them and then give us a cost analysis?
Sure. I'm going to creep a little bit into economic development.
Yeah,
here, but,
I get it.
But I would say from my perspective, a lot of what we try to do is make sure those needs are identified and addressed beforehand. So I'm thinking of kind of site readiness things. Okay. I'm thinking of our suite of rate offerings, and do we have those available for those folks that would like to come and do business in Omaha. And so we try and do as much of that work on the front end. When we get pretty serious with a customer like we did in Facebook and others, is we would go through a more kind of detailed kind of system review to make sure that impact is what we think it is.
And the distribution then, as an example, you might pass an area that might be growing residential over the top, and you can plan for not only that growth, but the new company as well.
Yeah, ideally, or even, just to continue that thought process is other large customers. We would also do that too, where, is this really conducive to broader economic development efforts or residential growth? Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And number 4 is really this reverse pitch thought process, right? So here are some projects, reverse pitch them and give us your technological solutions of those other than building, and what's that look like. Mm-hmm. That's the challenge and the new learning that I think that we'll find and see if we can. I think, Director Moody, to your point is, how do we kind of begin to think out of our box, right? Because we get kind of pushed in it, but this is a way where we're going to have others help us kind of expand that box of thought and opportunity.
Great.
Could you go back a couple slides?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one. Nope. There you go. So I just want to make sure I'm clearing a couple things. So in the first, what did we do? You proposed T&D capital projects, no generation capital projects considered?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. A lot of the generation needs are sort of identified in the IRP process. Mm-hmm. But what we did do is we understand that there's a value to capacity, or there's a value to line loss, or there's a value to avoidant energy, and of course there's a value to the T&D project. So while remaining objective, we tried to be pretty generous to say, hey, if we can drop the load, there's all these value streams that are tied to dropping that load, some of the ones I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. So we did consider the value of capacity in that thought process.
Okay. And then that same bullet, paired highest potential projects. How do you define what is highest potential? Potential in terms of?
Yeah. So the thought process from the team was we need a little bit of runway. So what I mean by that is if you've got something that's got to be done in 2018 and you need to build kind of an incremental program Let's say we're going to pay a premium for some EEDR program or something like that. We really need time to kind of stand that up. So if you're near term in the next year, 18 months, it's probably going to be hard for us to react to that. If you're long term, there's a lot of ambiguity around you. If you're a project that deep, we don't really know if you're going to happen or not. The other thing is kind of like the certainty of growth. So if we know that the developers have sewer infrastructure and we've ran distribution, we're highly confident this is probably going to go, then that kind of certainty regarding load growth is also valuable. So, you know, the more certainty you can get on the different project attributes, generally the further you could go with the idea.
Okay. You asked us to challenge you, right?
Sure.
So when I first dug into this and started thinking about it a little bit, it felt really narrow to me, which is to say, you know, we've had many conversations just in the last year about the merit of energy efficiency programs for our customers and what our role should be in helping our customers be more energy efficient, which is a tough position for us to be in because it's going to, if we do it well, we're going to push load down, right? And so there are some challenges for us in that sense. This is not really an exploration of that, right? Like the way this is really about, we've got some T&D issues primarily that are acute in certain pockets. To what extent can DREE help us address those, right? So we're talking about EE and DR really kind of in that narrow sense rather than kind of in a broader sense about what should our role be in helping our customers be more energy efficient. I just want to make sure I'm thinking about these terms.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This was not a broad review on the value of EEDR. This was how do we take the programs that are, you know, in the market or that we have in our program offering and use them here in the smartest way possible.
To address these issues, specifically the T&D issues.
Correct.
Okay.
And I would say too, primarily the emphasis was on demand response.
Right.
It's really sort of a peak shaving
Yep.
exercise. Can you knock the peak down?
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what we imagined when we first stood up this particular? You know, we've got IEM, we've got 7 of these. Is this where we started, or did we start with a broader discussion about energy efficiency DR and zero into this?
Yeah, so I could certainly give you my perspective.
Yep.
My perspective was when IEM was first commenced, it was very broad. Very broad, and it was in my perspective, it was ambitious based on schedule and resources, and I think all those things are going to work themselves out. But the reason I flip back to slide 7 here is we understand that there are technologies that we didn't necessarily evaluate in this that could be used for points of congestion on the distribution system. So in other words, you have solar, you have storage, you have mobile conventional gen, you have all of these other things. And we took a challenge from the senior management team that, hey, it feels like this review of EEDR may not be as comprehensive as you know you could have done. And we said, hey, we totally agree. The thought process was look at EEDR first, kind of build that base, and then when we continue the work, specifically in item 6 here, then we'll start to kind of layer on those incremental technologies that may allow us more flexibility and more opportunity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, so it's when you talk about the non-traditional solutions, you've mentioned the word technologies come up a few times, right? Which is something that we need to be acutely aware of. But I feel like to me, it's a philosophical discussion in some ways about what our role is with respect to encouraging our customers to be more energy efficient.
Yeah, so here's the conversation where the team got to, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the discussion, both Troy and Brad here, is that when the team looked at this, there is natural energy conservation that's occurring with or without our programs and initiatives today. Right? And so the team really felt that trajectory of energy conservation is occurring in a metropolitan area that's significantly growing without any load growth. So it is naturally, it's just incumbent on what's going on, even with our programs that are really designed to reduce peak demand by 300 megawatts. It's happening. And so the team really thought that's going to continue to happen. That trend is not going to change.
Yeah.
And so the theory is now, how do we use the programs that we have and really leverage it for the benefit of all customers, right? Very clearly.
Yeah.
And so,
no, I think that's a great characterization of the effort, and I think, you know, it's an optimization. It's how can we use these tools and these things that are happening and use them in the best way when it comes to system planning.
So fair enough, and I don't disagree that the natural energy conservation that has been happening is going to continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That seems quite logical to me. But I guess my question is, do we generally speaking have a is what we're predicting through 2028 is kind of what you talked about. Is that what we want? I guess. I mean, that we're just kind of throwing our hands up and saying it's going to happen without us, whether or not we intervene or not. We've got a couple of EE programs.
Sure.
Is that the trajectory that we want, or because we provide energy services, it's our mission, to what extent does the suite of energy services we want to provide change that trajectory in any way, up or down,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
like
right.
EVs could push it up.
Could.
I think from, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, from the team's perspective, you know, the overall mission is providing the most value for customer owners.
Sure.
And so as we look out externally and we see customer owners exhibiting energy efficiency behaviors and demand response behaviors, we're not making a philosophical statement about it, that at least as a team. We're kind of saying, hey, how can we come alongside you the best?
Mm-hmm.
And how can we plan your system the best in light of what you're doing? And so in that sense, it's very much a partnership as far as the working together and what we're seeing on the whole system.
Yeah.
The one thing I would add to that is, by looking at the T, the D, and the G, and thinking about those costs and how can you defer those, if we'd seen an NPV positive change, right, or benefit from that, we would have went after it a lot harder.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was the point of stacking all those up on top of each other to say, is this something we need to push really hard for because it's the right thing for our customers in the long run? It reduced costs for the organization, so it would help all customers in the class. So being very specific like that, and I don't think we've ever taken that effort of really diving into that level. We've done some higher views of that from a system standpoint, but digging down deep and knowing that we'll have to continue to do that. And as Brad said earlier, if you think about the new technologies coming into play, there'll continue to be new ones, the efficiencies, the cost of those will change, and trying to look at this, and this is where it becomes the philosophical piece, understanding how all these can be utilized or leveraged in the future, and having a basis to be able to do that, we thought was very important at this stage.
Well, the one thing that I would like to add is just for context, this is
strategic initiative, very, very important for us to move, and this is where the future is. It does not replace the strategic directive, right? And I think this philosophical debate or discussion that we would have is something that I think it has a much better place at the strategic directive level. Where are we going? What are the things that we're trying to do? Well, low rates, reliable system, high customer satisfaction, environmentally sustainable. Are we hitting all of those through these initiatives, through this suite of solutions? And how are we moving these organizations? So your challenge is excellent, and it's something that we're definitely looking at expanding the work that we're doing here in this initiative. I would say it's something that we keep those strategic directives very much in mind as we continue to expand this set of tools. How do we best meet these strategic directives that the board has set for us?
Yeah, good point, good reminder. I'll reflect back on our July conversation, our workshop. And we had kind of kicked around ideas, Director McGuire and I, around a potential new strategic directive around DER, which kind of, that was distributed solar, that was energy efficiency, EVs, a lot of those things. And I think, generally speaking, we kind of said, we're good for now, sort of pending how this stuff works out and what the IEM work looks like, and let's just punt on that. So I think you're 100% right, and I do think this is great work. Like, don't get me wrong, this is good, this is important, we should be doing it. To me, I think my hope was for a broader, more different exploration of energy efficiency and what our role is with that. And there are two different areas to do that.
And I would say the team, as they looked at it, came back and said, listen, there's this natural energy conservation that's occurring today that essentially is flattening a load that typically would grow 2 to 3% a year. And so I don't know exactly the megawatt kind of numbers that were in there, but they quantified that over a period of years in which they saw that. And so the theory was, if we would accelerate that even faster with our current cost structure, we would drive rates up for all. That would challenge strategic directive number 2 on competitive rates, right? And so the rationale was, how do we take those tools and drive it so there's benefit for all customers, and yet reduce capital spend and other dollars that create greater benefit, you know, across all customers. And that's where the team came back and said, listen, here's where we looked. We think we're already down this path, and we already have an initiative around 300 megawatt of demand reduction with our current DR and EE strategies that are going on. So with that being said, I think the team came back and said, we are going to look at this because we think there may be opportunity and value and benefit here.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's the right play, right?
Yeah.
Like this is an area where I think we should have focused our efforts, and I get it, and it makes perfect sense to me. I also don't, I mean, that we often talk about if we, with respect to energy efficiency, if we take a more active role in that, we're likely to see a reduction in load, which is going to mean that costs are going to go up for other customers. You know, or not. Like, but there are the revenue recovery programs that don't exist in the state today that could 5 years from now, right? So there's a lot of unknowns that may change that.
I want to make sure that it's not necessarily a loss of revenue and it's higher rates. Energy efficiency could result in us obviating the need for more market capacity, for more, like, it's not necessarily a bad thing for the customer. Ultimately, I think this is where the philosophical question goes in, is what is it that we're looking for our customer owners, right? Let us figure out the best optimal, let us optimize with all of the tools that we have available to us, and if that is energy efficiency and demand response, and it lowers the load, and it ultimately results in the lowest possible cost for all of our customers,
sure,
we will not shy from doing that.
Right.
I think that's
very true.
All right, I'll be quiet for a while.
Continue. I really agree that we may need another strategic directive in this area, but things are changing so quickly now, and it'll be interesting after we see all of these people talking like this as far as all the innovation and everything.
Yes.
Do we need a strategic directive for this area or not? It's a pretty important area.
Well, I just said I was going to be quiet, and you're right, I wasn't.
I'm sorry, I go to chew on.
To that point, though, I think we just removed a bullet around energy efficiency from which strategic directive? 5 and 13. So, like, that's the thing, is like we're seeing this. It was kind of filtered in some other places, and I don't know the right place for it. I don't know where it should exist. Maybe it's in 9.
Yeah, or should there be a whole separate one? I think that's our discussion.
Or maybe it's in these initiatives, right? It's what is it trying to achieve with the directives? Let us, through this initiative, show you the suite of options and tools, including energy efficiency, electric vehicles, solar, all of the things that we have at our disposal to match the direction that you want to do. It's so that. I'm sorry for.
I mean,
no, you're right.
And I think your point is to artificially create an SD around energy efficiency.
You're suboptimizing
the may drive decisions that don't balance all the SDs together, and that's what I would say as well. Let us use it as a suite of tools, regardless of what they may be, to drive the best value, and let us be able to
be flexible,
articulate that.
What you're saying is that this gives you more flexibility. The good thing is that we're getting this report. We've never had a report on this before, and it gives us information that we need, and if this gives you the better tool to do it and the more flexibility, that might be good.
Sure.
And I think some of the things that you're looking for are in the initiatives that are yet to come.
Okay.
We're still working on. We've seen previews of those, and so I think some of the questions that you're asking for when we get to 5 and 6, I think you'll understand sort of this is the building block that we started with, and when we get through the 6 initiatives, I think it'll be a much broader perspective than what you've seen.
Okay. You'll be pleased.
Thank you. All right, cool.
Just one comment on his strategic directive. So as we started this year, kind of looking at those a little harder and reevaluate them every time. This is just a good example, I think, where we worked to put those together with the board and the senior management for a reason. Because when they do things like this and use their resources to look at ideas, we can't be changing these. I'm not saying against that at all, but to change these strategic directives quickly is just my opinion. Yeah. We might want to think twice about doing that because we're building so much around those. I mean, it's like our base. So I'm just throwing it out there. It's kind of interesting to hear these discussions going on. Again, like I say, I'm always a little hesitant to change some of those unless there's a really logical reason to do it, because Tim relies on those and all the senior managers to make these major decisions, create these task force, do all those things. So I guess that's just my opinion and throwing it out there for down the road when we do discuss these things.
It has to be compelling.
Very compelling, because there's so much built on this base of strategic directives. My opinion. From watching it from ground one to where we're at today. So.
Yeah.
Of course.
So just remind me, please, because I have problems understanding without some kind of example. What is customer value proposition that we're trying to provide?
So there may be other thoughts in the room, but when I understand the customer value proposition to be is sort of a holistic approach at all of our competing interests. And from a management perspective, specifically what I mean by that is rates, reliability, environmentally sensitive, kind of some of those big pillars of sort of our business and the services that we provide to our customer owners. In my mind, as an individual, that's the total customer value proposition.
Okay, thanks.
It's a great question.
Well, and I'll ask it again as it comes up again, as it should.
Sure.
So, to Tim's point that indeed we have a natural energy efficiency going on right now. That's not just true for our own OPPD service area, that's true throughout the country.
Sure.
As new technologies come on and they're widely adopted. What is true for Nebraska, at least, if not OPPD specifically, is that we are using more energy per capita than 43 other states. And so, even though we have low rates, we have higher than national average monthly bills. I think what...
Yeah. Measured by megawatt hours or kilowatt hours, not by dollars. We have some of the lowest bills nationally measured by dollars. Because our rates
we're going to have to go back on that, because I think both the IEA and the studies on energy burden that have been done.
Happy to go there.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
But low prices would drive more usage.
Okay.
I mean, just economically. So that doesn't surprise me.
Sure. But if we're so the question then comes, how much are we paying per month? How much of our customers' monthly bill ends up in our pockets? You know, we worry about taxes ending up in the other governments, but for us as a government, it comes to us through the energy bill. And how much is that? So I think customers would value having to spend less money on energy.
Sure. And I can't wonder, if I understood your question correctly, I can't wonder if maybe some of the revisions to SD2 as far as reporting affordability, it may support that effort.
Well, where I was headed, and that's
Sure.
fine, yeah, is I too feel like this is pretty narrow or narrow, and that we do need a bigger, more protracted discussion on what kind of energy services we're going to deliver, and whether in fact we want to take the attitude that we're fully built, we need to keep funding the system we've got, or is it time to look hard at how we can help people put more of their monthly dollars into their local economy at the grocery store or other places, contracted work around town. You know, can we help them reduce their monthly bills through energy efficiency at a rate that is beyond what is naturally occurring? And I think that's what other utilities have done, in fact. We see that happening over in Iowa. We see it in other places. Now, not so sure. I just look across the river, not sure what's happening in public power nationally.
Are you talking about rate structure, in other words?
I wasn't. I was. Yeah. I mean, this kind of evaluation would be useful. But rate structure is where that would show up. It would show up in more than
rate structure.
Yeah.
I think that has to do with rates.
So maybe I'll just make an observation before I, unless there's more.
No, go ahead.
What maybe didn't get a lot of discussion is why are other people able to do this, and a strategic team comes back to this group and says, it really doesn't make net present value sense for us to do it.
Our net present value.
Correct.
Not the customers.
Either way, I think it's...
No, it includes customer in this too.
Yeah.
It really does include customer in this.
Rate's going to go up.
So, I mean, when we look at the IRP, we add energy efficiency, DR, battery, solar. We did a variety of items in there, right, that looks at that net present value of the whole integrated resource plan, right? And so we picked in the IRP the most optimum portfolio, which identified additional wind, and so it didn't identify some things that would have drove increased cost into the integrated resource plan. So when we do the NPV, it's just not about OPPD as a corporation. It is about our customer owners, very clearly.
Well, and the lower the rates, the lower the savings opportunity, and the more difficult NPVs become. I mean, it's mathematics, quite frankly. What do we use for cost of capital?
I'm sorry, say that again, Mark.
I'm saying the lower the rates are, the lower your savings opportunity is.
Sure.
Okay, and that challenges all NPV projects. So what becomes very sensitive is what weighted average cost of capital are we using, Javier, for these projects?
Depends on the project, between 4 and 6%.
Yeah, and see, that's a...
and we're not using just a weighted average cost of capital. We're using our opportunity cost.
Your opportunity cost, sure.
And do you use the same one for our infrastructure, the T&D that we're not building, as we would for the customer who's installing the ground-coupled heat pump? Even though their money is not our risk?
Yeah, so in this analysis, we used our cost of capital, because if we select, if we make a decision that is suboptimal, we're passing back incremental cost to the customer that we weren't otherwise going to pass back. So while we didn't consider my neighbor's cost of capital out where I live, we did consider the cost impact to them by making a potentially suboptimal decision.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, but I think your point is well taken. What we're doing is we're driving towards that by holding rates for 5 years, and that's allowing people to keep more of their money and spend it. And we're doing it through a variety of strategies, including lean initiatives, portfolio management. So we are driving savings out to our customer owners. But it's a very gradual one. When we get to the point where we're 20% below the average, then I think we've done an awful lot in support of that. And of course, we'll reset that goal then and a new milestone. But I think the organization's aimed at exactly what you're talking about, Rick, is how do we help people conserve and save, and part of it is what we're charging. And we're holding that flat in the face of inflation. We're holding it flat. And in the face of adding more renewables, we're holding it flat. So we're doing environmentally conscious things and combating through efficiencies the natural inflation that's happening. And when I look at the national trend going down, I don't know how many LED lamps I bought in the last month, but my house is slowly converting, okay? You're right, every appliance you buy now is way, way more efficient than they used to be. So there's a lot of natural, but if rates were much higher, people would be adopting those things much quicker because the payback would be much better. So the fact is, our low rates are partially defeat some of those efforts because the payback isn't there. But I think we're accomplishing exactly what you're talking about. We're helping people keep more of their paycheck. I don't know, I've never seen the national statistics about how much energy we use individually, because, you know, I'm not sure why Omaha, Nebraska would be below the average, quite frankly. I mean, we have air conditioning loads and things like that, but yeah. So I don't know. I think your point's well taken, but I think we're actually doing a lot towards that. My perception is we are.
Thank you.
I agree, thank you.
Unless there's any other questions.
No, there are more questions. I'm sorry to do that. Is the reverse RFP just a technical question? Is that the same as an RFI kind of thing? I'm not sure.
I think some people would interchange the language, but the idea is if you vendor had a problem like we had, how would you solve it? So people can respond, this is how we'd solve it and this is what it would cost, or they can just respond, this is how we would solve it, and that may be the distinction between the request for information and the request for proposal.
Generally speaking, in the past, when we've had a large project like this, we start off with an RFI to make sure that when we go out, they understand exactly what we're looking for, they can provide us feedback, and then when we go out for the RFP, we have more specifics, and we use the feedback from those entities to provide the specifics for the RFP. So usually they work together. The RFP is just kind of the final, hey, what is your plan? How do you suggest we address this? And so it's just the terminology used for that type of contractual.
Thank you. So outside of this conversation, I would like to visit with whomever to talk about some of your evaluation tools for the DR and the EE. We've talked about the RIM test before, and I guess I just would like to sit down to talk about that.
Sit down with Julie and Jay, and obviously Brad, I know you were involved in the IRP piece and looked at the evaluation tools on that. Javier probably as well.
Yeah, because you've set up a structure for how to evaluate, and so as we talked on our one-on-one, you know, assumptions matter, and default values matter. So I'm interested in what those are.
I understand.
We can do that.
And just one thing, by looking at transmission costs, distribution costs, and generation costs, we've added additional value streams to that type of resource that we probably haven't done in the past, making it look better than it would have under old processes. So where the value of EDR in the past may have looked like this, by stacking those additional values, it starts to look better. And so that, I just want to be clear that the process that Brad and the group has worked on does just that. It adds these other values, and that's why it's important to look at what is the cost of the next generator, or to reduce what you have currently in the portfolio, what is the spend on transmission distribution, because it helps to elevate that in a way it wouldn't have been elevated before.
So one more specific question.
Yeah.
Does the adoption of the PACE financing change any of what you're doing here?
So my recollection of PACE financing is you can sort of mortgage an energy infrastructure investment that is tied to the value of the land.
Correct.
Are we speaking the same? Okay. If we are, then there would not have been any incremental sort of value or cost or benefit assigned to that. We would have been agnostic to that for this effort.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Brad. First guy always gets
You're
a lot
welcome.
of questions. Did a great job.
Thank you.
You might be tired.
I don't know. I may have questions for the next guy.
Is the adoption of lithium technologies in outdoor power equipment. All of the lawnmower people, riding mower and push mower people are all going electric in a big, big way. Leaf blowers, all that stuff is going lithium ion. My neighbor has an electric mower. I wish he'd use it more often, but he has one. And there's real advantages to it, but it's going commercial and industrial really quickly. It's going to happen, which benefits us in terms of
technology.
Yeah, but it's a shift that you don't think about every day because, you're not doing it every day, but a lot of that stuff's going electric. The old electric mowers, I remember from a kid, they're dragging cords around the yard,
We had
running
one.
over them.
You know, when I clipped the cord twice, my dad said, forget it, I'll do it.
You know, I think what's really, I think what's really important here in these initiatives is that we are developing the template and the, I'll call the science around as technologies change, as price points come down, as opportunities increase. Now we have the ability to measure them, to evaluate them, and to utilize them where we didn't do it in this kind of concrete manner. So from a learning organization, we are uplifting our game and how we're thinking about this in the future. And so that's the value. And so as those elements change, whether it's market prices, capacity prices, technology prices, customer use and patterns or desires, we'll be able to implement those in these models to kind of create, are there additional values for us to do things differently? So that's one of the strategic values of these initiatives very clearly, is that we're setting a template that's something completely different than what we've historically looked at before. So I just don't want that to be remiss in the conversation here. So.
And I don't object to something being a little narrow on the front end here, because if things are too broad to start with, they collapse under their own weight and they don't get off the ground. They just don't. They don't make it. So there's nothing that precludes us from broadening the scope going forward, but I'd like to get it started maybe on a little more narrow focus and see how they do. And so I'm comfortable with it personally.
That's a good point.
Yeah, at the same time, you've got the innovation technology people thinking of other things too.
Yeah.
You know, that they can put it into one of these areas later on if need be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're probably wondering why Joe Lang's up here talking about economic development when Tim O'Brien's over here. And part of what we did in each one of these is to take an individual in a different role and allow them to have the opportunity to look at it without kind of their traditional work blinders on in that respect. And, you know, Tim is deep involved in economic development, and this is an opportunity for another individual on the team that doesn't deal with it every day to maybe take a different perspective or a different look at it or through different lenses. So that's the reason why Joe's up here. He's not going to talk about NERC or FERC today or anything like that. So, Joe, why don't you kick off on the Economic Development Initiative?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Joe Lang, Director of NERC Compliance and SPP RTO Policy. I apologize, Brad went long. I'll try to go quicker. Our group normally gets involved with economic development, some of the larger projects, and how it relates to some of the FERC regulations of the transmission and generation and SPP regulations, and some of the state and Power Review Board regulations as well. And also some of that relates to the rate structures also. Tim and the Economic Development Group, it's obvious they've done a fantastic job with structuring our economic development program as it is structured today. Like as Tim mentioned, just getting involved to provide a fresh set of eyes and keep our strong program improving. So in the past 4 or 5 years, OPPD has made some significant strides in economic development. If you think about some of the projects, I mean, some of the very significant ones, Facebook, obviously, Travelers, Fidelity, there's some Novozymes, there's some very significant projects that we've been successful bringing to the area. Troy noted earlier on one of the slides, and as was discussed, that our load projections appear to be pretty flat out into the future. And economic development is a considerable aspect of ensuring bringing in more businesses to help put upward pressure on some of that load growth. And obviously that load growth helps keep our rates low for all of our customer owners. So some of the things that we did and looked on, we took a deeper dive into understanding our customers, getting a better sense of some of their load profiles, the things that they need, like what sort of staffing needs do they require, and what sort of our general area, what staffing needs can this area help fulfill. Obviously staffing needs, if an organization comes in and needs thousands of new employees, our some of our employment rates are obviously very low, or our unemployment rates are very low, and so that's a consideration of that. Also looked at our availability for infrastructure, so looking at our transmission capacity and trying to find the sweet spot of where we have good transmission capacity and there's land available, there's gas, water, sewer available, so trying to find those sweet spots is very important to bringing in new economic development in an economic way for OPPD and the surrounding area. Also looked at numerous case studies, so it's evident that OPPD has a strong economic development program, and we looked at other utilities to see those that have strong economic development programs to learn from some of their the things they do. So we looked at like TVA, AEP, Duke, talked to some consultants that work with customers directly on some of their economic development initiatives. And so we learned a great deal there, and is part of what we'll talk about here. So some of the things that we learned, coordination is very important through the process. We need to coordinate internally. We have a lot of different areas internally that is very critical for us to coordinate and plan ahead. Coordinating externally with the chamber, for example, the state, even city governments. Just ensuring that we have a good coordinated process. It's not just OPPD in this, it's not just the chamber, it's not just the cities. Working together is what's going to help us be successful. Site control and planning, so making sure that, like as we just spoken a moment ago, finding those sweet spots in the system, that we're looking ahead, and when customers come, they don't kind of take us off guard in the sense if someone comes in with a large load, we're prepared and we know where in our system to optimally place them. And then some of the marketing materials, so being a little bit more proactive in getting out in front of some of these customers and concisely showing them what we have to offer them. What are some of our rate structures? What are some of these sites that they would fit well into? Some of our next steps. So one thing we pretty much wrapped up at this point is having a standard economic development process to look at T&D costs, generation costs, how the rate structure helps us recoup various costs, and understanding that. So when a customer comes in and says, I have 50 megawatts, and here's a spot on the system that we would work with them. We can look at our costs and look at revenues and understand the impact to OPPD as an organization. High potential sites going forward, again, looking for those sweet spots, understanding them, make sure that we have a portfolio of those laid out, understanding our customers' needs, what are their potential natural gas needs, and so we're ensuring that we're putting them in an optimal spot. And then having a menu of these tailored solutions, so it's very easy for us to communicate to the customers what this menu looks like, put this in a pitch book so it's cleanly provided to them. You can go out and proactively market to folks, and they can easily see, oh wow, this is what OPPD can provide me, these are some rate structures, just as the board approved earlier this year, like a rate 261M, and they understand that and how they could benefit from it. So having that clearly and cleanly provided in a pitch book. So that's in gist what we have been up to on the Economic Development Initiative.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions?
Sure. There seems to be a pretty high emphasis on attracting new businesses into these sites. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ribbon cutting, is the recognition of a job well done, right?
Yeah.
So what's the economic development efforts for small businesses that already exist here?
Yeah, so an example would be we do, I don't know how many visits, typically it's in cooperation with a variety of different changers, over 300 existing business contacts that we do with a variety of different businesses where we have our people and/or it could be in conjunction with the Omaha Chamber or Bellevue Chamber or Blair Chamber where we'll contact with them and maybe with our own staffs, businesses to talk about economic development, about what they're doing, how they're doing it, do they need assistance, what are their issues. And so many times our folks on the economic development team or our electric service designers or our account executives will refer those to the economic development team or refer them to the chambers that can provide those specific services, whether it's training and development issues or a number of different things. So, we, and Tim, I don't know if you have the specifics on the existing business contacts that go on, but.
That's a lot. Just OPPD alone, we do 125 ourselves, and to Tim's point, we connect to the region and the chamber, that number goes exponentially to several hundred outreaches just from that perspective.
Recognizing that half of the economic development projects in our region come from existing businesses very clearly, and that's the reason why we do those contacts.
Thank you. And so I'm struck back to your first slide, I guess, the targeted economic development. You talk about how economic development has benefits to the region. So is there some kind of net present value calculation that's done on that for the investment of all of the time and everything else that's done?
So yeah, it's that first bullet under what did we do kind of relates to that. So it's kind of a process of understanding what our costs would be. So again, if a customer came in at a certain megawatt level and there's a certain site that we're trying to analyze, the costs are different, per various sites. And so it's a standard process to understand what those costs are, and then a rate structure. So looking at various rate structures the customer would be under, and then understanding how we recover our costs through that.
So how big's the team here that does all this coordination? It's
so the IEM team, and maybe you're referring to the economic
development team. Yeah, it's just the four of you. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they obviously coordinate it, and then Tim and his team is excellent at, like we noted here earlier, the very fact that it takes a lot of coordination internally, externally. So yes, it's the economic development.
And I know, I'm sorry to interrupt. And I know that other people show up on airplane trips out to California. The heavyweights are brought in to help land things. Is that right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. So
I don't know about the heavyweights.
No, that's meant in a positive way. Yeah, all right. The big dogs. There you go. Right. So there's definitely an investment that accrues to a particular organization. To me, it seems a little bit like the subsidy we were just talking about, energy efficiency. This company benefits from this handling by our team and lands here. I don't know how the rest of the system benefits.
So just kind of broadly speaking, by bringing in these new loads and helping our economies of scale and spread our costs out amongst more load, megawatt hours, helps us keep rates low for all of customers. So like Facebook, for example, obviously that's a significant size load, helps notably for my bill at home.
But we all pay for them attracting them, correct? So we're all paying for that?
I guess in essence, yes.
Yeah. And so my question was, is there some calculation for our investment, what I as a customer get back?
That's part of that, in essence, an NPV look on it. OPPD is incurring certain costs to attract, these economic development customers. And so the NPV is woefully in our favor. But we do look at it on a case-by-case basis, because if we put them in an area of the system that, say, requires significant transmission upgrades, those costs can tip the wrong way. And so we want to make sure that we're analyzing that and making good decisions.
All right.
Just one thing on that, though, I suppose, is public power. We're a piece of the economic development tool, and that's what they do. They go out and become part of a larger team to say, how do we bring Facebook or whoever else it may be, or grow existing companies. So our role as public power, in my opinion, is that we do send people out to help the chambers and the state chamber, whether it be in your district or my district or anywhere in our service area, so.
Yeah, and I think that's fair.
But it's gonna cost a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
The
fair.
overall
and-
benefit is probably pretty large. You're just saying, how do we measure that?
Well,
We've had some good
so
successes,
the
I
parallel
guess.
I'm trying to draw here, and see if we have the same quantification and calculations done on this, is that the investment in energy efficiency is a subsidy, according to some people around the table. I think there's also a subsidy for the economic development. Our charge is to generate electricity and to deliver it. And economic development isn't a core duty of the public power district.
Well, in your opinion, it's not, but I think everyone else it is.
So I would say, I would say very clearly, I mean, I think Tim, you know, I'll just use this, our economic development group typically has an objective to grow revenues 2 times their cost, right? So, and so it is really meant to recover in the incremental revenue generated from the economic development initiatives to cover that cost. That was the original metric that was developed under the economic development side.
And still good?
And still good, 2 times revenue today. So you moved it up, so.
I think it's great. I ask you, do you have really first-class marketing materials to hand people and discuss with people? Because this is one of the best arrows that Nebraska has in its quiver, quite frankly, and it's the reason that Facebook's coming here is what OPPD was able to do for them. So, you know, I think and I think everybody benefits. You know, I wouldn't worry about 2.1% unemployment because wages will go up, and where I see it is when I go to Wendy's or Arby's, they have signs on the door paying 10 or 11 bucks an hour. Forces wages up, people have more money in their pocket, they support the local economy, everybody wins with economic growth. And I don't know that you can judge individual development efforts against their cost. I mean, the only time we lose is if Nebraska or OPPD does some really dumb economic development moves, like some of the stuff we saw in Alabama with Mercedes, where they paid $200,000 or $300,000 per job. Some of it got out of hand for a while in the last 20 years, but you know, this is great for everybody. And I don't know how strong a backlog or list you have of opportunities and growth, but you know, this is one that I'd put a full court press on because this is big stuff. You don't want a stagnant economy. You want earnings growth. You want growth, population growth, and everybody benefits, I think, from the leverage the size provides us. The bigger we get, the more we can lever what we have, the more we can hold rates down, and everybody wins. I think it's great.
You know, and we don't, I totally agree with everything you say, but we don't only deal with the large guys. We also do the small people. And I'll give the example of the Small Business Administration has monthly meetings that they encourage new businesses to come and give their little spiel about, I'm a new business here. I go to those every once in a while. I go to them. Every time there's an OPPD customer rep there to help people out, to help them with that. If there anybody who has any questions or anything, there's an OPPD rep there. So we deal all the way to the tiny little companies who are trying to start their little hairdressing salon or whatever, to all the way up to the Facebook. And I think that's important that people recognize that too.
And we do provide energy efficiency services through our current portfolio services that we offer today too. So,
just quickly echo what you said. I agree, and I also, you know, when I look out, one of the challenges that I think, and this is not for OPPD, this is the region, is attraction and retention of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so I just want to encourage us to not only continue doing this work, but also continue to do the work that I think you're doing with the chamber, to continue to ensure that our community is growing in positive ways that allow us to attract and retain people easier as we go forward. Labor shortage is more of a challenge than it is finding a job.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's a great example of OPPD's commitment, and I would tell you that we have led a variety of initiatives along with the chamber, but really drove the site development work. And I think Tim was coming in as we established it, but continued it forward to where, you know, the site development work that was going on at the chamber was near a 345, 161 line. If those projects were 10 miles away, that would have been at a higher cost to serve those customers. And we may or may not have gotten those customers, but because of the foresight, we were able to do the things we needed to do. Director Moody, what you're talking about is the really the Prosper Omaha 2 about people, place, and really prosperity piece, is to grow economic development, to grow those that are underemployed, to be greater employed, to take those that are, and that's the work that I'm going to be doing with the chamber and raising $32 million on. So, and to help those initiatives. So it's very clear we're actively involved in economic development, not only in the prosperity and the economic development, but really beginning to think about what place do we need to recruit people and to have them stay, and then about the people themselves and about the diversity of people and the way that we deal with people here in Omaha.
And on that note, the way that we deal with people here in Omaha and the emphasis on the Omaha Chamber of Commerce, we do serve 13 counties. And
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we're actively involved in each one of those economic development organizations, and all the chambers that are in that role too. So no doubt about it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. Thanks, Joe.
So next we'll have Wendell Young come up and talk about some of the commercial industrial partnership strategy has been identified in the Integrated Energy Marketplace Group.
Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. My name is Wendell Young. I am the Project Director of Transmission and Distribution Applications and Customer Initiatives. Like Tim said, I'll be sharing with you some information from our commercial and industrial customer partnership strategy sub-initiative for you today. As many of you know, OPPD has had a long history of partnering with and providing value-added product and services solutions for our customers. We've been doing this for a long time. And the Integrated Energy Marketplace team also feels that a strong customer partnership is essential to help position OPPD as a trusted energy partner in the future and minimize the risk of marginalization from new technologies, third-party suppliers, and competitors within the marketplace. This team believes that facilitating and executing delivery of innovative energy solutions will also help us generate additional revenue and support rate improvements and further improve our overall customer satisfaction. To begin our research, the team first conducted local and national market research to better understand the current dynamics of the C&I solutions marketplace. We then synthesized those learnings from those studies to determine which products and services we felt our customers wanted OPPD to offer. We also evaluated the roles within the value chain to determine the best fit position for OPPD and which roles we should play in delivering those solutions. And finally, we identified what new capabilities were required to be successful in the energy services marketplace. So what did we learn? So through our research efforts, and as you've heard already today from Troy and Brad and some of the others, is that third-party suppliers are already targeting our high-spend customers. When you look at this group of large commercial customers, the top 20 of our customers actually represents about 25% of our overall retail sales, which increases our risk vulnerability for marginalization. But if we are able to support the customer needs in this group, we believe that that'll be important to help stabilize the OPPD revenue base and position us as a continued leader and energy partner for our customers. We also learned that from a purchasing perspective, economics and resiliency still are the primary drivers for this customer group. And they also feel that OPPD should prioritize solutions, and you heard this today, that provide a mutual benefit for OPPD and all customers, not just a specific market segment. And in OPPD, we believe that OPPD is in a prime position to quickly deliver and launch new offerings, utilizing third parties that are already within the marketplace, and again, that would help position OPPD as a trusted energy partner in the future. So next steps for the team. Next steps for our team is we plan to continue our business plan analysis of the potential for electric vehicle charging infrastructure within the OPPD service territory. We also plan to continue to deliver advanced energy efficiency and energy management solutions to our customers, while also developing, as I've mentioned in other meetings, our processes and our capabilities and potentially new offerings for those who are interested in new technologies within the distributed energy resources marketplace. And this includes both technology offerings and rate offerings. Second one here, or third one here, we'll also monitor future advances and opportunities in large-scale cogeneration, where there's a clear benefit for OPPD and its customers. And we plan to develop targeted pitch book, like you've heard previously, and marketing materials that highlights OPPD's value proposition to the customers within our group. And then lastly, we want to utilize this large customer group and scale our learnings and outputs from this group across the rest of our service territory and our customer base. We believe there are other opportunities and advantages that we can take moving forward in other product areas. So with that said, I'll open it up for any questions about services.
You do have a new product now as far as the solar for the for people who want to put on their solar thing. Could you just, since people might be listening, to discuss that now a little bit?
Yep, absolutely. So we're kind of looking at solar from a two-pronged approach, and I think you'll hear this here in the next set of presentations, so I don't want to steal too much thunder. But the first thing is we want to look at our current processes of how we interconnect customers. We want to have a positive customer experience for them. We want them to be able to have access to information that helps educate and inform them about their options, what their cost-benefit analysis may look like, and what their true benefit is behind the meter, right? So behind the meter solutions is one avenue. While we're doing that, we're also learning through that process alongside the customer and through our third-party marketing partners of how best to integrate it, how best to manage it, what are the challenges from an interconnection standpoint, what ideas and technologies can we bring to bear that makes it easier for folks to get connected. Okay, so that's one avenue. Another avenue is what you're going to hear in a little bit, and that's for those who don't necessarily want to make a large investment at their own property behind the meter. They'll have access to potentially an OPPD offering on a larger scale. Well, we'll put in a utility scale system. They'll have access and the opportunity to participate in that arena. We'll design rate structures around that. We'll provide them similar information about how they can support the environment, improve sustainability, and those types of things. So you'll see more about that offering later, so I don't want to steal too much of that, but it's a pretty exciting time for improvements in distributed energy. Thanks for that question. Yeah.
To our commercial and industrial customers, do we offer services like power conditioning and load management and those kind of qualitative things?
Power quality
some of them
type of ideas?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a history of providing power quality solutions probably for the last 15 to 20 years. We've done it in a variety of forms. We've helped support them through standby generation if that's the need. We've done it through UPS sizing and support in that arena. We've done power quality analysis, and we have a team of technical folks that helps assist us with that. And then when the issue becomes a little bit larger than that team's capabilities, we have access to bring in other professionals to help with the analysis. So we do provide that holistic solution as part of our turnkey package offering, mostly to our large C&I customers, and in some cases to our small and medium business customers as well. On the residential side, we do have some other products related to that with our surge protection program. We've had a residential UPS program for a while. We've sunset some of those programs, but the surge protection program is still in existence.
And we've actually done infrared scanning and testing for power quality or heat spots within primarily industrial and manufacturing. Based on the need of the customer. They may talk to our account executive about that. They may not have the skill or the resource inside the organization, and we may provide that service to them. We also, for I would say probably the larger customers are Eco 24/7 and our commissioning work that we do with them. You know, the example is, you know, UNMC would probably be the example that we'd use, or even off at Air Force Base, 27 task orders around energy efficiency and those kinds of work, and UNMC, a reduction of about 5 megawatts that we help support that business and others, even new build buildings where we've gone in 3 months later and then recommission that work. So
I think this is terrific. I'm not sure where you are in developing your trade ally partnerships for EVs. I would just reinforce my understanding of looking at several reports on electric vehicles that it's a paradigm shift. People talk about range anxiety in terms of the infrastructure needs. In fact, 80 to 90% of the charging is done at the home or in the workplace. And people start, yeah, I mean, it's at-home fueling, which everybody now is distant fueling, except for the farmers. So it's a change in concept, and I think this is great that you're pursuing that. One of our first conversation, my first conversation period with Jay, and one of my first ones with you was about what are we going to do about supporting EVs. So this is great, long time coming. And I like to support the early adopters pursuing distributed energy resources. Too much, I've heard from people who want to be early adopters, they felt like they were treated as competitors. And that's a tension that we're going to have, honestly. Sure. So this is wonderful that this is how we're stating it and moving forward.
Yeah, so on the EVs, I think, so there's a number of efforts going on with EVs, but you'll see here on number 5, we have in our next group of initiatives, we have a team that's looking at EV infrastructure both at the home and within the OPPD footprint. We also have a small team that's working with other utilities across Nebraska to try to better understand how to build out statewide infrastructure and what's the best strategy for that. The question now is are we at a point where we look at that from a legislative standpoint, or is it just about the technology? So we're just conversing and dialoguing and ideating about that. So I think you'll see more conversation around statewide infrastructure, but just in a few months you'll hear about what our team is looking at for OPPD's footprint. From processes, I think you'll continue to see DER processes evolve over time. We learn as we go alongside the customer. I think the customers will start to communicate differently about, is OPPD helping or hindering? Our hope is that they believe that we are partnering with them along the journey, and we're providing them different options that maybe we didn't have to offer them maybe a year ago. So hopefully in 2018 we'll be in a better position to say we truly are, you know, helping customers in this space.
Yeah, I think you've got a huge opportunity. If I can just share, a buddy of mine who is outside of the OPPD service area is putting together a multifamily complex. So he turned to me, and because I own an electric vehicle, and said, well, what kind of charger should I put in? I think that's your role, or an opportunity for your role, is that, you know, the businesses need to know, you know, what are the technical opportunities and what should they put in. He's doing it to help brand his particular complex.
I will just tell you, we have several visits. I think even this week we have one, or certainly next week, where we're meeting with a large multifamily developer and a relatively large corporation just about that, their on-site ongoing charging. So we're going to have that conversation with them this week, and so you may see this strategy roll out quicker than you see it in February, just because of the customers' needs and what they're doing and how we can support that. And I think long-term, the question is, are we in the charging business, or are we in the energy supply business, and do those overlap, and what does that look like, and how do we go about doing that? And that's really the strategy and the processes of what we need to put together. So,
just a couple quick things.
Sure.
Thanks, Wendell. This is good. I'm excited as well to echo many of Rick's points. One is just a logistical, and the timing we've got beginning 2018 for Develop Trade Ally. Does that mean that you expect to have some of the trade allies up and running in 2018?
Where we're at right now is we're looking at the technology parts. Different vehicles require different charging infrastructures. So I don't know that we'll be in a partnership position in early 2018 or in 2018 at all. But we do want to understand what technologies are required for different car types and different locations, whether it be at the home, the marketplace, where you're entertained, where you're at school, whether you park. We need to understand that better. That'll be part of that analysis.
So we're beginning the process of that exploration.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Two more things. One is I'll make a plug for education for the board on the C&I work that we're doing. I mean, I'm loosely familiar with a lot of it, but I think if we have an opportunity during a board meeting at some points for us to just learn more about what the details of that, I think that'd be helpful. And then you said, what were the numbers? 20 of our largest customers are 25% of the total retail demand. Is that right?
Retail revenue.
Retail revenue, thank you. Which, that's a lot just in 20 customers, right? And maybe potentially represents a risk if one of those customers just decides to up and leave. And or if those customers decide that they don't want to buy power from us anymore, right? So if they want to go independent, distributed, whatever that might be, which is going to be a big challenge for using the med center as an example. Like they don't have enough room for all those solar panels, right? So it also presents an opportunity for us. So I'm glad to see that we've got that much of a focus on working with them and those other big clients because they're critical to us.
Right.
But I think that they're also really thinking in the same way that we were earlier about like what does the future entail for us as it relates to our energy production and use. So those conversations are going to be critical for us over the years.
And the best defense we have is the low rates, because it makes it so difficult to make sense of an investment when you're paying a low regional rate. It really, I've run the numbers where I work before, couldn't make it work.
I don't disagree, but I think there are other variables that are starting to influence those decisions strictly beyond economics. More so than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, would agree with that.
I'll disagree a little bit.
You didn't disagree. I'll disagree a little bit. My economics folks in the building where I work are quick to point out that low rates are of value, but they aren't drivers for locating a business. It's a workforce.
It's a factor only.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. All right.
But I'm going to say, try and take an uneconomic proposal to a board of directors and get them to do a bad deal. They won't do it. Generally, they won't do it. I mean, if you want to put in your own power generation, and the numbers don't pan out, ain't going to happen.
Yep.
But some of these guys are doing it, as we saw at APPA, I think for branding purposes in part.
Yeah.
And so the economics are calculated on that side of things.
Yes.
So I think we can't lock down or try to lock down. I like the fact that you're working with people to avoid defection. Basically, I think having that long-term relationship is fantastic, and you guys have a good track record of building it.
I think our last item here on the IEM is around our municipal and wholesale opportunities. And Aaron Smith, our Director of Operations on the T&D side, will have the opportunity to kind of share that. You've heard some of this over a piece of this anyway for the last several months, but Aaron will articulate a little deeper on what we mean about municipal and wholesale opportunities.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here today to present on our municipal and wholesale opportunities team that we looked at. So what the mission was, our team was to look at how OPPD can leverage our existing capabilities to expand on our partnerships to both generate new revenue for OPPD, but at the same time bring new value to those municipal customers. So through our initiative, what did we do? The first thing we did was we created an inventory and definitions and categories of our current municipal and wholesale customers. We have currently 18 entities with some monetary relationship with OPPD across our territory, across a variety of different services, whether that may be some wheeling energy on their behalf or providing some line work, construction, maintenance services, a wide variety of things that we do for our municipals. And so based on our research of what the towns we believe are looking for, we evaluated our OPPD's current position. So what are our capabilities? What's our, are we competitive for offering potential new products and services to these municipal customers? So as a result, we looked at numerous options, including what we currently do and what we could do. And then we took those and prioritized down to what our recommended offerings were. And how we arrived at those was looking at both what are we doing, what are our core competencies, what are things that are in the OPPD wheelhouse that we can take and execute really well, and then also what are things that we have the capability to do, even though maybe we're not doing it today, but something that we can stand up relatively quickly and do without addition of staff. So what did we learn from that? First, we've seen that the wholesale and municipal customers are showing changing preferences and looking for new supply and service options. Particularly what we've seen is interest in renewables such as wind energy. And so that's one thing that we feel like we have an opportunity to help them with. Also, OPPD we feel is in a unique position to enhance our partnerships and provide customized services based on our wide range of what our core business is. Finally, it was evident as we looked through this that we really needed a role to own this municipal strategy. Throughout all of our existing customers, they have a lot of aspects that go across the business and a lot of different interfaces, and so we felt like we needed a role to own that from that holistic level. And then finally, that OPPD would benefit from a targeted marketing materials approach to communicate the value that we can provide. And so kind of taking a look at what do these offerings look like and what are some of the next steps related to the offerings. First, number one is we feel like we can provide municipals with access to low-cost renewable energy by leveraging scale. So for example, when we go out for our wind contracts, typically we're looking in the hundreds of megawatts range, whereas some municipal communities may be looking for 1 megawatt or 5 or 10. And so by partnering together and leveraging that scale, we can help them meet their renewable goals at the same time that we're meeting ours. And so we're looking at that as a great partnership between the public power entities in our state. Number two is that holistic approach by using a pitch book and that targeted marketing materials. We may have had a relationship with a customer for many years. Some go back 70 years at the beginning of the creation of OPPD, and we may have provided some line work services to them, but they may now be interested in some wind energy, some renewables, and so we'll be able to provide that suite of products. Third is we're looking at targeting municipals for additional services such as our Southwest Power Pool, energy marketing, and transmission operations. One good example of this that you've recently heard about through an update a couple of months ago was that we are going to become the NERC registered transmission operator for the cities of Grand Island and Hastings utilities. And so we're excited about that new partnership. So that's a great example here of something that's in our wheelhouse that we can provide value to them and some additional revenue for OPPD. The fourth is providing some additional downstream products and services. A lot of the products that Wendell previously mentioned that we offer within our own territory, we feel like there's interest of others on municipals, and so this could be both at the commercial industrial level as well as residential. And so what we're envisioning here is that this could be in partnership with those municipals. Maybe they're at the size where they don't have the staff or the resources to stand up a program on their own, but they still have interest among their customer base for these type of programs. We feel like that's something that we can help them out with. And then finally, expanding our distribution and operating agreements to perform various aspects of utility operations. This is something we've done for a long time. Doing whether that's maintenance or construction or other line work or other just little bits of utility operations. It's that same thing of leveraging our scale to be able to help provide that to those customers. And so finally, again, to kind of sum it up, is having that pitch book to be able to go to customers, ones that we've had really long-term relationships with, and say, we've done this for you for a long time, but we're also have these new services that we feel you may have interest in, and really, back to our core operations that can help us generate that additional new revenue.
This is kind of a roll-up opportunity. Have you kind of scoped out how large the opportunity is within our service area, how many municipalities there are, and where they're at? I mean, it sounds like you've got a great suite of services to offer. I'm just curious if you've scoped it.
We have, like I say, there's some even within our footprint that are very independent municipals and have been for over 100 years, some of them, and we provide some services to them, and they may have some interest in these. We've seen that through some of their actions of some have gone out on their own to get just a handful of megawatts of renewable energy, for example. So we feel that the market's there. We've looked throughout the state, like with Hastings and Grand Island, for example, that we're going to become the transmission operator for them. And then there may be at some point to even potential to expand outside the state if the opportunity presents itself, and it provides value on both sides.
Are you aware of any, let's say, aging generation plants that probably won't be replaced or shouldn't be replaced that we can take over the providing for?
I don't have any on top of mind, but that's something that we'll continue to evaluate as we go through this.
So as you start having those conversations with those entities, they don't always announce what they're going to do with their generation until they've already made that decision. But by having those discussions and dialogue, you can learn about it ahead of time. You can try to find options. One of the things that we've talked to some entities about is potentially partnering in that area in the future, and so it's still kind of in development, but that is
I'd be less interested in taking over aging plants as replacing their capacity with our purchasing capabilities and our excess capacity. I mean, the leverage presents profit opportunities for us, positive opportunities.
It's not on like running an old facility, it's really on that purchase piece.
I think you've got a whole bunch of opportunities in front of you. I really do. It's a great roll-up.
Yep.
And probably just ripening.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks.
All right. If not, I'll turn it back over to Troy.
Okay.
All right, so if you remember, I'd mentioned that there was 3 outstanding initiatives that are currently being worked on. You can see those up on the screen. The first one is electric vehicles, and kind of thinking about, how do we promote these in the future? How do we help customers who want to have these as part of their household? And then we also are taking a step at trying to look at our system from that standpoint. So if penetration of these increases, how does that affect us from a system standpoint? How do we plan for that? To be upfront, we've kind of found that right now we really have no way of identifying where they're being located and which circuits, and so that's something that we're going to have to address over time. You'll hear more about that when we come back later to present on that, but there's focuses on that and then partnership opportunities throughout Nebraska. The second is the non-traditional solutions, which was mentioned earlier. And again, this is really about looking at a suite of these kind of new technologies and how can we integrate those and use them as a portfolio to solve our system needs in the future. How do we value them? How do we stack the benefits and understand the costs and applications and how they've worked well for other organizations or not. And then the third is back to that. We call out residential, small, medium business, but C&I has kind of crept into this also. But it's just kind of understanding that that new world of the future as distributed generation becomes more prevalent. And how do you leverage that? How do you partner with customers? And how do you make sure that you have the right processes in place to be that energy partner with customers who want to go down this avenue? Next steps. So kind of the heavy lifting of those 3 outstanding initiatives should be finished by the end of Q1 of 2018. Also be looking to after that heavy lift and after we've presented and found approval, we'll be looking to also implement those into the organization, which probably will be sometime through 18 into 19. The next bullet will provide an update. I believe it's actually in Q2 instead of Q3, so sometime around June, I believe, and I forgot to update that slide. So, and then the completion of the 4 outstanding initiatives that you heard about today through the end of this year. And that is all I have. Unless there's any further questions.
2 hours. Thanks, Troy, to you and your team. And information.
One last one. So kudos. This is really good. I was really impressed with all the work that's going on. You talked a little bit about how this kind of creates an ongoing process for us to continue to measure variables and make different decisions. Does that mean that this IEM team is going to continue to exist, or how will that? What will that look like in terms of?
Yeah, so I think it's probably not in the manner in which they exist today. I mean, we're thinking about how do you begin to operationalize the work that we're doing. Yeah. And you heard a couple points in time is when do we move this to the customer side? When do we move this to other parts of the organization? That's a conversation we'll have over a period of time. Okay. But what I see is the templates, and I would say they're kind of books and how they did the business up to this point in time. We may grab other people in different parts of the organization to kind of continue a different part forward and let them get back to their work and give them a break a little bit and a breather. They've been pushed pretty hard, I would say, and done just an exceptional job of balancing all of the things here. And so it's a great opportunity to get other people to think about the mindset shift as well. So they've done some great work. So thank you all. So
yeah, indeed.
All right, thank you. All right. Well, if we're going to have a closed session here for the discussion concerning the quarterly update on our enterprise risk management, senior management compensation matters, and a community solar project. We're going to make Director Mines will make the motion. Yep. Do you have it?
Got it. I move the board go into closed session at this time, 12:29 p.m. to discuss enterprise risk management matters, senior management compensation information, confidential aspects of proposals to the district for a community solar energy project, and potential litigation. The enterprise risk management decision and discussion involves confidential information regarding security for district property, cybersecurity, and utility infrastructure protection, and may also involve discussions protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine. With respect to senior management compensation, closed session is necessary to evaluate the industry, executive compensation information that has been designated as confidential by the consultant providing it, and because the discussion of compensation information may address individual district senior executives, and therefore a closed session is needed to prevent needless injury to the reputation of individuals involved, and no senior manager has required a public meeting. With respect to the discussion concerning a community solar project, a closed session is necessary because the pricing and certain other items of the request for proposal are considered by bidders for the project to be proprietary information which, if released, would give advantage to business competitors and serve no public purpose. There will be a public presentation concerning the solar project during Thursday's regular board meeting. Finally, the discussion of potential litigation involves matters protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine. For these reasons, a closed session is clearly necessary for the protection of the public interest and for my breath. Thank you.
You got a second.
Got a second.
Okay.
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Gay?
Yes.
Mines?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Moody? Yes. Trinan?
Yes.
Yoder?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, the motion to go into closed session is passed. This closed session will be limited to a discussion concerning enterprise risk management, senior management compensation information, confidential aspects of proposal to the district for a community solar project, and potential litigation. No votes or board action will be taken during this closed session.
No vote.
And I think we're going to have the board go ahead and grab a bite to eat and come back.
Closed session was limited to a discussion concerning enterprise risk management, senior management compensation information, confidential aspects of proposals to the district for community solar project and potential litigation. No votes or board action were taken during the closed session.
You guys are done.
Takes